Sigard ain't shit. Arden is the true leader. I guess the question is, like, should we do unit reviews? I'm working on an FE4 tier list that'll hopefully be out by the end of this year. But I can do, like, brief overviews of the units, just talk about my thoughts on them. Especially if there are any people in the audience who haven't played Fire Emblem 4 yet. So Sigard, I'm sure you've heard of him. Absurdly strong unit. Not only because his base stats are really good, in part since he starts as a promoted unit, but his growths are also quite nice, and he gets a silver sword for free, which at the start of the game only he can use, because weapon ranks in FE4 are fixed based on your class. You can eventually pass that silver sword on to, like, Ira, or... Actually, not too many promoted mounted units can use it. Promoted Beowolf can use it, but Nisha and Alec can't. Even once they promote, they don't gain A-rank swords. He has Pursuit, which is required for doubling. Not everyone can double, because not everyone has the skill Pursuit. And he'll just stomp through the entire game if you want him to. Probably the easiest, like, character in the franchise to solo with. Obviously not available for the second generation, because Fireball. But yeah, really quite good. Nisha and Alec are kind of clowned on because their stats and growths are pretty mediocre compared to Sigard and compared to the other calves we're gonna get soon. They each have their own problems. Alec just hits like a wet noodle. He does have Pursuit, so he can double people. And he also has Nihil, which seems really good because, oh, it'll stop critical hits and also skills. Most enemies don't have skills. Critical hits are not a thing in this game, unless you build up 50 kills on a weapon. They're worse than the best unit in the game. Yeah, they are worse than the best unit in the game. But you can't get critical hits unless you have 50 kills on a weapon. So enemies will never crit you unless they deal effective damage, which is an auto crit. So Alec has Horse Slayer immunity, but there's one Horse Slayer in Gen 1. So like, who cares, right? And then he hits like a wet noodle. He has 9 strength. He starts out with the Iron Sword, which is only 6 might. So you see up there he has 15 attack. The thing is, if you trade Nisha's Steel Sword to him, that's 10 might. That goes up to 19. That's only 2 less might than Nisha, and Nisha is unable to double. He doesn't have Pursuit. So Alec can actually deal pretty decent damage against anyone that he doubles, which will be a fair few number of units because weapon weight in this is pretty extreme. You see that swords only have 3, but even once you get to lances, the Iron Lance is 12. Any non-sword unit, sword units are almost always going to be able to double, even if they're at a speed disadvantage, just because of how much non-sword weapons weigh. And that includes tomes that are not wind as well. So Alec can actually dish out quite a lot of damage. His defenses aren't going to be phenomenal, but they're going to be good enough that I think he's a very solid member of the team. Whereas Nisha is more of the, I hit once, and then maybe one of my funny skills goes off. So he has Critical and Onslaught, previously called Accost. Critical is exactly what it sounds like. He actually can get critical hits. The crit rate is skill, so right now he has a 7% crit rate. And that does get added onto the crit formula for 50 kill weapons. Basically, okay, the TLDR of how it works is once you get 50 kills on a weapon, it will have skill percent crit chance because it tracks how many kills you've gotten with that weapon. See, the star is 0. Anything over 50 gets added on. So 51, 52, 53, you get +1, +2, +3, etc. Up to a cap of 99. Or up to a cap of 100. So you get 50 plus skill percent crit chance. Nowish doesn't have to get those 50 kills in order to get the 7% crit, but his kills don't get added until he hits 50 anyway. So it's a little bit like, a 7% crit rate is not that big a deal. Crits in this are very strong because it doubles your might before factoring in enemies' defense. So, like, it generally deals more than triple damage. Which is nice, but a 7% chance to deal a bunch of damage versus a 93% chance to not deal a bunch of damage isn't, phenomenal. Onslaught is also kind of cool. It lets you... Basically, when you have higher HP and higher AS, there is, I believe it's also a skill percent chance, but let me double check that I'm not spreading misinformation about that. I'm pretty sure it's RNG. FE4 a cost. It's probably still a cost on the Oifey bot. Yeah, okay, so it is, oh god, the formula is so fucking, I'm glad, okay. It's your attack speed minus the opponent's attack speed plus your HP divided by 2%. So that formula, your AS minus the foe's AS plus your HP divided by 2 percent chance to proc. And also it only works if you have HP of 25 or more. Total, like current HP. So, when it goes off, it'll just trigger an additional round of combat after the first one. So you attack, the enemy counterattacks, and then if Onslaught procs, you attack and the enemy counterattacks. So he will still take the hits, which means that if he gets knocked down below 25 HP, it can't go off again. But theoretically, this skill can proc multiple times in a row. It can actually proc up to 20 times for 20 rounds of combat in a row. Of course, for that to happen, both you and the enemy would need to be like extreme dodge tanks. It's such a yeah, I agree. It's such a fucking weird skill. But it technically is another chance for Nisha to do extra damage. I'm almost certainly gonna pronounce his name wrong. I'm sorry, I'm a cracker. I'm trying. But he's he's the gambler unit is what he is. And I feel like the Nisha fans cope on critical plus onslaught. He has a higher chance to deal more damage than Alec does with the guaranteed damage. But if you just give Alec a better sword, then he just does more damage. Yeah, Accost is one of the goofiest skills in the franchise. Oh, Arden. So, classic Armor Knight stat spread. Really, really high strength, really, really high defense, really low speed. The idea is supposed to be that he doesn't double, but like I said when talking about Alec, well, so he doesn't double because he has Pursuit. Or because he doesn't have Pursuit. But if you give him Pursuit, surprisingly, Arden's speed is actually pretty good, even though his speed stat is not that good. And that's because this game has negative AS. So if you give Arden the Pursuit Band, which he gets for free, although you should probably give it to someone else, he actually doubles like 80% of enemies on the map that you get the Pursuit Band, simply because he uses swords. The weapon type is that important, because all of the lance, fire, thunder, and axe enemies weigh themselves down to have a negative attack speed. Negative AS is going to come up with another unit as well that allows them to double like all the axe fighters here. It's very funny to watch Arden, who's supposed to be this incredibly slow unit, double cavaliers or I guess there's no axe fighters in that chapter, but mages, these supposedly medium speed enemies, just because sword's good. Of course, Arden's like big problem is he only has 5 movement. You can see it right there underneath the talk menu. 5 move on a map this big. Oh, how do I? What button is the map? There it is, okay. Trying to figure out my Nintendo PC. This is the smallest map in the game, by the way. This is the smallest map in the game by a significant margin. This is about half the size of the average map. 5 move is atrocious, because it just means he doesn't get to see combat. It's already tough for infantry units that have 6 move. 5 move is really, really bad. Now, this game does have roads, which increase your movement. Roads cost 2/3 of a tile to move over, so, you know, you can move over 3 tiles of road and only take up 2 points of movement. You would think this would help the low move units because they can actually, you know, move farther. If Arden is moving on a road tile, he actually has 6 points of movement because he moves 1, 2, 3, that's only 2, 1, 2, 3, that's only 2. Oh, no, he actually has 7 tiles of movement on a road tile. The problem is this also applies to all of the high move units. Sigard has 12 tiles of movement on a road tile. Because 1, 2, 3 is only... Oh, no, he has even more than... I don't want to do the math, but Sigard has significantly more move if he's only on road tiles. You also don't want to end your turn on a road tile because they lower your avoid by 10. So typically you want to go like 1, 2, 3, that's only 2, 1, 2, 3, that's only 2, 1, 2, 3, that's only 2, and then I move off for the last couple. So it just ends up in such a situation that all of the horse-mounted units will be 3 or 4 turns ahead of Arden in terms of movement. And then all of the other infantry, aside from Azelle, will be 3 or 4 turns, or will be like 1 or 2 turns ahead of Arden. So he doesn't get to do any fighting. When he can fight, he takes very little damage. He deals quite a lot out in return, even without the Pursuit Band. And he has Vantage, which is a nice bulk boosting skill. Vantage means that he will always attack first if his HP is below 50%. And since he's supposed to be a tanky unit anyway, it basically, if someone attacks him and he counters attacks but doesn't kill them, or if he attacks someone and doesn't kill them, he gets counterattack, gets knocked down below into Vantage range, then on an enemy phase, he can kill them without taking an additional hit. It's just a bulk boosting skill, it's really nice. He doesn't have the strength to one-shot enemies, because FE4 enemies are really tough. HP values get quite high in this. These are the Chapter 1 enemies, 36 HP, right? And they just get higher from here. One-shotting with Vantage is not typically going to be a thing. But it does mean that you're going to take less attacks overall, and that can be nice. And if you get to the point where this Iron Sword has crit on it, maybe you'll Vantage crit people, or you can trade him like the Light Brand that has crit and Vantage crit people. But yeah, it's a nice skill to have. It's not enough. Arden does have a couple of secret events associated with him as well. The big one is that he gets the Pursuit Band, which can give Pursuit to the holder. And like I said, if he has Pursuit, he can double a lot of people, but he would need to see combat first, and it's really hard to get him there. Let's talk about the 2 new units we got, though. So, Azelle is a mage. Much like Arden, he is dismounted. And much like Arden, he has armored move. Kaga did it first, in case you think that Tellius screwing over mages with armored movement was an evil thought unique to intelligent systems. Nope, hashtag Kaga did it first. Azelle only has 5 move, whereas other infantry have 6. That's one of the worst things about him. Although the weapon situation certainly doesn't help. So, he has Pursuit, which means that he wants to double in order to kill enemies. His speed is, like, he tends to be the fast mage, right? He has I guess there is a faster mage than him, but since he doubles, he feels like the fast one, right? Whereas that other one has to gamble. His speed is decent, not great, but decent, and his magic is actually really good. 10 base magic, and I think he has the highest magic growth in Gen 1. Yeah, he has the highest magic growth in Gen 1, except maybe, does Teltu have a higher one? I have to, Teltu's like an Est, so probably not. FE4, Azelle, Teltu. crap, I forgot the 4. Hold on. I'm pretty sure he either has the highest magic growth in the game, in the first generation, or it doesn't matter because, the 40% is actually not that great. Tells you isn't an est. I know, that's a joke. But regardless, he's supposed to be the sort of the project unit, because if you get him to level 20 and he promotes, he gets a horse. That's so wild. You get a mage on a horse? That's so cool. Good luck getting him there. He doubles enemies in this map because these guys have negative AS. They have negative 7 AS. And so he's faster than them. Next map, he'll double some people, but he's going to start struggling because he's got negative 3 AS right now. He needs to get 3 speed level ups just to hit 0. So already it's going to be difficult for him to have good enough combat to secure the kills he needs to hit level 20. But he also, since he's stuck at 5 move, he has the exact same problem as Arden, where he's just lagging behind and 3 or 4 turns away from being able to even reach combat. His starting position in this map is really good because it puts him near these axe fighters. He and Lex can team up to fight this guy, protect this village. He can also go this way if your calves all went south instead. So that's nice. It sort of gives him a much better first impression than perhaps he deserves, because once you start running into lance and sword enemies, fire's gonna weigh him down too much to double. You can purchase Thunder in Chapter 2, I believe, and that's a little bit better than Fire, because it's not as heavy, but you can't get him a Wind Tome until Chapter 4, and if he's not promoted by Chapter 4, then it's kind of a lost cause. He gets swords and a horse on promotion, which is kind of cool, because he can use, like, the light brand, and that's the thing people will cope on. It's like, he's the horse mage, he gets a horse! Getting him there is such a struggle. It's not really difficult, but it is incredibly tedious. Either finding opportunities for him to do combat despite his terrible doubling and low move, or just taking the maps at a very slow pace so that he can keep up. And the problem with taking the maps at a slow pace is every map has multiple villages that will be slowly destroyed by these brigands, right? They'll do 1 damage per turn to a 10 health village. You see there's already some damage here. You get less gold the more damaged the villages are. So if you take things slow, say I wanted to feed this enemy to Azelle, well, he can't reach because he only has armored move, right? If he had regular infantry move, he could kill him turn 1 or turn 2, but he can't. So you get less gold. There's an active detriment to going slower, because typically I'm like, yeah, you know, you take more turns, whatever. In this game, there's actively a detriment on every single map to going slower. So if you want to train up Azelle to get that horse, I mean, go for it, but it's gonna be a struggle. On the other hand, Lex starts with a horse. He has a very bad weapon type, worse than Fire. 18 weight, and it's physical, and it's 1 range. And he doesn't have pursuit, so he cannot, he cannot double anyway. He has Vantage, and he's already pretty bulky, with 9 defense, 33 HP, and good defense and HP growths, especially because of his Holy Blood. Is it A, I think? Yeah, A shows off the Holy Blood. The now Holy Blood boosts him a little bit. And he can use every axe in the game from base. He's the only axe user aside from promoted, the promoted Master Knight that we get. I don't know if Lachesis' name has been changed or not, but she was called Lachesis in the old translation. She's the only other axe user. So every axe you get is basically Lex's PRF, but they're all really bad, so there's only 2 that he actually cares about. The hand axe, in case you want 1-2 range, it's really heavy, so you're not, thankfully he's not at risk of getting doubled, because enemies don't have pursuit, but even with the pursuit band, you're not doubling things. And then the Brave Axe, which you get at the end of Chapter 1. It's a brave weapon, so it hits twice. It has really good hit, which most axes don't, and very good might, which most axes do. Lex can potentially Vantage one-shot some things just because Brave lets him hit twice first, which is kind of cool. Vantage, it can also just sort of work as a bulk boosting skill like it does for Arden. The main appeal of Lex, though, as cool as the Brave Axe is, the Brave Axe comes like a chapter before you would get the Brave Sword normally, so it is your only brave weapon for a little bit. Paragon, though, that is his big appeal. So double experience gain is so absurd, and I think Lex is the biggest demonstration of this because in Generation 2, you get another Axe Knight who has basically the same stats as Lex, but no Paragon. He gets the Brave Axe after one chapter as well, so he should be theoretically the same unit, but he's so much worse. So Lex, just using Paragon to consistently stay far ahead of the EXP curve, even with FE4's experience formula giving a significant drop-off for over-leveled units, Lex just manages to stay ahead of everyone other than Sigard, who starts out promoted, and Quan, who starts out promoted. And that's sort of what elevates him over the Christmas Cavaliers. He's probably going to be your first promotion, unless you're actively not feeding him. And his promoted combat, like, if you compare him at the same level to other units, especially other horse units, his combat is worse. Even before factoring in his bad weapon type, he's basically like an armor knight, right? High defense, high strength, low speed, not doubling, and his only combat skill, like Vantage, you can do some one-shotting with the Brave Axe, but enemies get pretty bulky in FE4, so even that's not guaranteed. The big thing is that he's always going to be like 4 or 5 levels ahead of the rest of your cast, until everyone caps, right? And then he'll sort of be on the same level. But during that, I'd say first 3 or 4 chapters where people haven't capped, Lex is just gonna be ahead, and it's pretty awesome. I think Lex is the biggest demonstration. Maybe Astrid is another one because of how she abuses bonus experience, but even without BXP, Lex manages to show Paragon is just the most busted skill that Fire Emblem has ever had. There's a reason they switched to Aptitude and made Paragon a DLC pay-to-win skill instead. Even smaller multipliers, like the thing that Robin gets, are really, really good. Swords. Yeah, so let's talk about these 3. Quan is Banneret. Okay, so that's a new class name. It was previously called Duke Knight. Now it's Banneret. I like that a lot better. That's a very cool name. So Quan is also a promoted unit. He's very similar to Sigard in the regard that he starts out statistically ahead of the people around him because he's in a promoted class. Now, you don't get that stat boost of promoting later in the game, but you'd rather have it earlier simply because being promoted earlier is good. And being promoted doesn't cut your experience game in this game. I don't think I said that when it came to Sigard, but your experience in this is literally just based on your level. Levels go from 1 to 30, and so being a level 4 promoted unit, your level doesn't reset when you promote, you just stay at level 20 or level 24 or whatever level you are at when you promote. Being a level 4 unit, he gains experience at the same rate as everyone other than Lex, but he just starts out with those promoted bases, which is really nice. He can only use lances, which are worse than swords, but he can use the javelin, which is kind of cool, and it's not like he's doubling anyway. He doesn't have pursuit. He does have a cost, adept, which is just a chance to double. It's better than onslaught because the enemy doesn't get to counter, but it is ultimately just a gamble. If he procs adept, he can hit twice and kill things. Otherwise, he's dealing a lot of chip and is reasonably bulky. I think Quan is a very strong unit, but there's just not much to say about him. He gets a holy weapon for like one castle at the end of the game. Or at the end of the generation. Well, not even the end of the generation, at the end of his time with us, because Quan is only going to be here until the end of chapter 3. There's 5 chapters in the first generation, and Quan, Ethlyn, and Finn will leave at the end of chapter 3. So I guess in that sense, he's sort of the closest thing this game has to a Jagan, because he literally falls off by leaving. But that's, you know, it's fine. He's really, really helpful during the first 3 maps where the rest of your units are training up, and then your training projects, end up being good enough for the last 2 maps. And so I like him for that. He starts out with a support with Ethlyn as well, which is cool, because like I said, you get a little bit of extra bonus for being next to your lover. It also means that he doesn't have to worry about stealing love points from other people or like messing up your pairings, but I don't know. There's just not much to say about him. I guess the downside of the lover thing is that if he dies or Ethlyn dies, both of them leave. They have the Pent Louise thing going on. But that's not really a downside because you don't want either of them to die anyway, because they're both quite good. Because Ethlyn is your mounted healer. She also leaves at the end of chapter 3. All 3 of these units do. But being the only healer on a horse until you promote Lachesis it's pretty impossible to overstate just how important horse healing is in this. Because it means she can keep up with your units that are actually doing combat. Because she has Canto, she can also get out of the way of enemies after healing people, because she can heal and then ride away with the remainder of her movement. Because you can Canto after attacking or healing in this game, which is not typically the norm. It's the case in Tellius and I believe also 3 Houses, but not any of the other Fire Emblem games. But she can only use C-rank staffs, but that's okay because the Mend staff is the only staff you ever need. You get it next map, and it is also C-rank, and she can just full heal people by using Mend, and then keep up because she's on a horse, Canto away to safety, and she can even potentially do combat because you get the Light Brand, which is a magical sword, and she has critical, which allows her to, well, land critical hits. This is kind of cool. Ultimately though, I don't think her combat matters. She's just a healer, and this game doesn't have vulneraries. You might have noticed nobody has any healing items. There are only 3 ways to heal. You heal using staffers, which Ethlyn's the only one that's going to be able to reach the front lines. You heal by waiting in the castle, which heals you slowly over a number of turns and consumes your gold, because every character has their own funds, which is their own gold amount. And healing in the castle consumes your gold. Or you heal all at once by waiting on a church, which gets you to full HP over a single turn, but also consumes your gold. So, Ethlyn is the only way that you can, like... I mean, it does technically cost her gold, because you have to repair the heal staff, but she's definitely the cheapest way to heal people. And also the most effective one, because you don't have to wait on a specific tile to do it. A pretty exposed tile, too. Like, the churches, there's no cover. Oftentimes, enemies can just, like, beat you up if you got someone at low HP. And it happens at the start of turn, too. So if you get beat up and then want healing, you have to wait another turn on the church to heal. Unless you're using Ethlyn to heal up. So it's a pretty big deal. The healing is a pretty big deal. And then there's Finn. Finn is a fan favorite, because Finn is the only unit who's around in both Generation 1 and Generation 2. He leaves at the end of Chapter 3 along with everyone else, but then he comes back in Chapter 7, which is the second map of Gen 2, and he'll be around for the rest of the game. So because of that, you train him up in Gen 1 as like a trainee project, and then he comes back and it sort of feels like, oh, now he's a Jagan! I promoted him in Gen 1 and now he's promoted in Gen 2! And that's pretty cool. I don't think he actually is a Jagan in Gen 2, because when you get him, especially when Seliph and Leaf's armies meet up, you have some other really strong units at that point anyway. but it feels like he's a Jagan. And sometimes feeling is more important than what it actually is, right? He has pursuit, so he can double. He has bases and growths. Like, he will grow and get better. And when he promotes, he becomes a banneret, much like Quan, who he looks up to. He also gets a couple of secret events where he talks to Quan, and Quan is like, hey, be better. And then Finn's like, okay. And then he gets better stats, which is kind of funny. And he gets the Brave Lance for free. You can sell it to someone else. I've mentioned getting things for free. I don't think I ever explained how items work in this game. There's no trading. The only way you can exchange items between people is to sell an item to the pawn shop and then buy it back with someone else, which costs you gold because you always pay more than you get from selling it. So if you start with an item in your inventory, it's not permanently yours, but it is an advantage that you don't have to spend the extra money on it. And a lot of people like putting the Brave Lance on Finn because he gets it for free and because he's one of the few units that like makes good use of it and can't use the Brave Sword. And he's a training project and people like him, right? He's canonically bonded with Lachesis, if I recall. I don't remember the evil capitalist pawn shop. Hey, they're just trying to make a living. Medical bills are so expensive in Judggold. They're just trying to make a living, all right? So the other skill that Finn has is Miracle, and you might think this is pointless, right? Like, oh, Miracle, that's one of the worst skills in Fire Emblem. This is one of the best skills in Fire Emblem. So, unlike all other Fire Emblems where it's like a % chance thing to protect you or whatever, if your HP drops below 11, you get extra void for every 1 HP that you're below 11, you will get 10 more void. So at 1 HP, you have 100 extra void. But even if you just get knocked down to like 3 HP, that's what, 80 extra void? That's still a lot. So it means that he can like dodge tank like a champion for 1 turn, because it's only on the turn you get knocked down to that. But you can manipulate things to be like, okay, I'll attack this enemy, they'll knock me down to like 4 HP, I get 60 extra void, and then I dodge everything and I kill them all. It's really good in the arena because you can manipulate your HP value since you know how much damage the arena enemy is going to deal in order to basically blaze through the arena and get extra experience that way. It's good against like groups of enemies since all of them have the same stats where you can know for certain no matter who attacks first, you're going to get knocked down and then just dodge everything. And the really crucial thing about it is the enemy does not see that avoid, because the AI in FE4 is actually smart enough that if it has no chance to deal any damage to you, it won't attack, except for some enemies in Chapter 6 will attack Seliph, which I think is a bug, but I'm not certain. But in general, the enemy is smart enough not to attack you if they have 0 hit, but they don't see Miracle. So they will think they can deal damage to you, and they will just suicide into Finn, and it's awesome, and you can't do that with other units. Yeah, Miracle's pretty epic. And it is probably the best attribute of Finn, even though him being in 2 generations is sort of the iconic thing. But yeah, Finn is cool. Finn is probably my favorite character in the game, because I'm a basic bitch like that. Do 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 do. I love that little seized castle tune. It just feels so iconic. So this is Midir. He is a bow knight or archer knight. Kind of what you would expect from a archer stat spread. Focuses in strength, speed, and skill, and he has pursuit, so he can double people. It's been renamed follow-up in this. The pursuit brainworms are so deep in me that I'm gonna keep calling it pursuit. That's no disrespect to the new translation patch. It's the same reason that I call Blood Echoes souls in Bloodborne. It's just stuck in my head. So I'm gonna keep calling it pursuit. He also has Onslaught, which I will probably slip up and call a cost sometimes, even though I think Onslaught is a better name. It's a cooler name. Onslaught. Like, that's a triggered Onslaught. You know, but it's cool, right? But yeah, he has follow-up and Onslaught. Notably, having both of these skills means he will always double, and sometimes he'll quad. And sometimes more than quad, because Onslaught can happen multiple times. Onslaught being dependent on both your AS and HP is also really nice for a bow unit because they attack without being countered. And I think Midir is probably the unit who benefits the most from the fact you can Canto after attacking, because it lets him do hit and run tactics by attacking from 2 range and then Cantoing away. It is also automatic crit against flyers. There's not too many flyers in Gen 1. Chapter 4 has a lot of Pegasus Knights, and then there's a platoon of Wyverns in Chapter 3, but that's about it. There are some enemy Pegasuses in Chapter 2, but they're part of a recruitment event, so like, killing them is good for experience, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The thing that really holds Midir back is bows kind of suck in Fire Emblem 4. He can do the fun hit and run tactics with Canto. But Fire Emblem 4, not only is it a game where a lot of your combat takes place on enemy phase, thanks to many of the later maps just having Kaga squares of enemies that will all charge you and you want to fight them all on enemy phase, but also because enemies are incredibly bulky, it's hard to just kill them on player phase. Even if you're initiating combat yourself, you're probably not going to kill them. There's probably going to be some left over, and so you're going to be taking attacks. And since Midir can't counter, he's not going to be doing as much work for you on enemy phase, and in fact will put more work on your lap on player phase when he doesn't kill the enemies that attack him. Except sometimes the AI is stupid enough that like hand axe brigands will attack him from 2 range because they really fucking hate him. The other thing that makes bows kind of suck is you might notice these stats are not particularly good. 10 might and 70 hit in comparison to 80 hit, 6 might on an iron sword, in comparison to 80 hit, 12 might on an iron lance. By and large, bows, despite archers having like the accuracy reputation in modern games, are very inaccurate, which is not great if you're trying to do chip damage, and don't even deal that much more damage than like swords, right? I think that modern Fire Emblem rightly gives bows significantly better stats than the other weapon types because the downside of not being able to attack at 1 range is, it's to make up for that, right? But here, they're just sort of not great, and the hit is especially, it's on the same level as axes, actually. It's really quite tragic. But you get the Killer Bow at the end of Chapter 1, and the Killer Bow is not only the best bow in the game, but one of the best weapons in the game. It is the only weapon with the critical skill, well, aside from a PRF that you get in Gen 2. It's the only weapon with the critical skill that most people can use. It has really high might, really high hit, and combined with follow-up and onslaught, Midir becomes a unit who can, not reliably because you do need to have onslaught trigger, but he's got good AS, and he's gonna fulfill the HP qualifier as well. He can pretty reliably one-round people, especially because every single one of these like 4 to 6 attacks has a chance to crit. And remember, crits in this game are double your might before the enemy defense. So they're a lot of damage. They're way more than just triple your might after enemy defense. So Midir fucking poggers when it comes to using the Killer Bow. There is another unit who likes using the Killer Bow, but he's footlocked, and also statistically about the same as Midir. Midir's a little bit slower and a little bit weaker than Jamke, So a lot of people will cope like, well, Jamke has it in his inventory, so you give it to Jamke because he's got better stats than Midir. But he does not have better stats to an extent that matter. Because in Fire Emblem, your stats only matter as far as meeting thresholds. And if Midir is one-rounding with his stats and the killer bow anyway, then having a horse and being able to do the hit-and-run Kanto tactics is far better than using overkill stats to deal 5 times the enemy's HP instead of just 3 times the enemy's HP, right? Overall, I think Midir is one of the worst mounted units, just because there is still the downside of, like, he can't take on the Kaga squares. He can't do enemy phase combat in a game where that is such a key skill. But he's better than people give him credit for, and he does still have that horse. DiMaggio. We got 2 new units. So, Edane. Edane is the second healer. Unfortunately for her, she suffers from the same problem that every infantry unit will, in that she's really far away from where combat happens. I think this is a much bigger deal for her than the combat-oriented infantry, because in order to heal people who are wounded, you need to be near the front lines. And with only 5 move, because mage movement, she's going to struggle to get there to heal people up. She does have higher magic, and notably a higher staff rank than Ethlyn does. B rank is enough that she can use Physic unpromoted, so it's pretty reasonable to, because Physic is 10 range. It's pretty reasonable to have her be close enough that she can Physic people, but not close enough that she can use magic, that she can use heal and mend on them. So it's not that much, it's not as much of a lost cause as you might think, but until you get Physic, it is kind of unfortunate. B-rank staffs also means she can use the Warp Staff. Now, Warp works differently in this than in other Fire Emblems. You got multiple castles, some of which are allied, some of which are yours, some of which are enemies. You can use the Warp Staff to send a unit to any castle you have conquered. So, you can't send it to green castles, but you can send them to blue ones. This is useful for, basically, if you need to send someone, like, to defend the castle, or just send them ahead to another place, it's very useful. It's pretty expensive, so I like sending her to some villages, because she cannot go through the arena. This is the first unit we've gotten who is unable to get experience or gold by going through the arena. So she's really going to struggle on funds, which is unfortunate because she's also one of the units who spends the most money. Because Warp Staff is expensive, Physics Staff is expensive, and those are her 2 primary tools. I don't think I've ever used FE4 Warp, so it's a really big deal in, like, Chapter 2, where you've got multiple fronts. It's also good if you are trying to use infantry units, because Edane has only 5 movement, she will often be near the units who struggle to catch up. So let's say Sigard, Lex, and Nisha, and Alec have charged ahead, and they've conquered a castle. And now you want to train up Azelle and Arden. Edane can warp Azelle and Arden to the castle that's just been conquered so that they can get to the front line sooner, right? So she's very good at enabling other infantry units. She's also very good at just sending people back if the home castle's under attack. And Warp gives a lot of experience, so in a ranked run, spamming the Warp Staff in order to get as much experience as you can as quickly as you can is generally a strategy that people will employ. Aside from that, obviously no horse sucks because you can't reach the front line, but she also can't do heal and run tactics like Ethlyn can, where you heal someone and then you canter to safety. If she's healing someone who's on the front lines, she's exposed. And, like, she's pretty frail, 1 defense, and she doesn't counter, so much like Midir, any enemy that attacks her is still gonna be alive. So that's the biggest, like, unfortunate thing about her. Kind of like Azelle, she starts in a pretty good position here, Not as in like, oh no, she's not gonna fight these guys, but the fact that she's not all the way up here means that she can actually be useful. I think this is her best chapter, because she can actually be useful sending people around the map, in terms of when you recruit Ira and Jamke, if you want to send Ira and Jamke through the arena, they either have to walk all the way back to the home castle, or you can warp them there. You can also arena in the other castles, but it's easier to do it in the home castle because you can go inside the home castle, whereas these castles, you just are on the tile and get to the village. So I like arenaing in the home castle when possible, because you can heal in the home castle, you can access other castle functions in the home castle, and you can have multiple people in the home castle at the same time. Whereas if you're trying to arena here, because it's one tile, only one person can arena at a time. So that's why I like her in this map. Does Deirdre have 6 move or 5? She has 5, because she's still considered a mage. Dew has 6, because he's regular infantry. And Dew is another utility unit, and I think that if you are just playing FE4 like casually and don't know too much about the mechanics, it's pretty easy to look at this unit and think like 3 strength, 15 speed, but no pursuit, so it doesn't fucking matter. It's just a void, right? He's doing nothing for you, right? His skills are also kind of laughable. Soul, when you're dealing no damage? Like what? And he's not a bulky unit either? And then bargain, okay, well I can spend half money to buy stuff, sure. But like, what is he doing with that stuff? Well, he's using it to steal. So thieves, you see how like all of our units have their own funds? That's also true of the enemy units. Typically, all enemies will have 1,000, but commanders will have a little bit more, and the brigands that destroy villages will have 5,000. And the same is true of pirates, which is especially relevant for Chapter 3, where you face a lot of pirates. They all have 5,000 gold. Now you might think, well, what is he stealing all this gold for? Well, he can actually give gold to other people, and he gets experience that way as well. So, what I think I'm going to do, I typically put them in this choke point, so that Dew can sort of steal money from the axe fighters and then give it to Edane because she's so gold hungry. Any of your other units that are struggling for money, which is a lot of them, Dew enables pretty consistently. He can also go through the arena in order to gain experience and money, and then he can give the money he gets from the arena to other people. I think Dew and Edane work together very well in this portion of the game, and then also giving it to Ethlyn, giving it to Lachesis, giving it to any of the money-hungry units in your army is just a really appreciated boon. So I'm going to have you go here. Unit review. So, much like Arden and Azelle, Ira also struggles to reach the front lines. She at least has 6 move as like a non-armored infantry, right? But she's not going to be reaching the front lines particularly often. When she does, her combat is actually pretty good. She has swords, which is always a plus, and very high speed, decent strength, decent-ish defense. It's good right now, but her growth is not great, so it'll fall behind pretty quickly. The big sort of selling point is she has pursuit, obviously. And she has Astra and Nihil. Nihil doesn't matter. There's like one enemy with a skill. Are there even any enemies with a skill in Gen 1? Because there's no killer. Oh no, there's some killer. There's the killer Jamke, and then there's a killer. I think there's a wyvern that has a skill or something in Chapter 3. But she doesn't even have any effective weapons, so you can't cope like Alec and be like, Horse Slayer! Horse Slayer! It's not that. Astra is just a % chance to attack 5 times. It's very impressive and sort of feels like the critical hit or whatever type deal. But in practice, it often feels kind of overkill. And she's not especially bulky either. Her starting situation's a little bit awkward because depending on where she is as a red unit, she's probably pretty far away from the front lines. Like, these are the guys we're gonna fight next, right? Unlike Azelle and even Arden, she doesn't start near enemies, so she can't really impress you, but she does have an easy time going through the arena. Even when outmatched in the arena, she can just sort of roll for Astra and get experience and money that way. And she's the unit that gives you the Brave Sword, so she gets it for free, and she can sell it to someone else if need be. So that's kind of cool, but there's just not that many opportunities for a sword infantry to contribute. Even though swords are the best weapon type in the game, it's just, unfortunate for her. A lot of people say that her combat is, like, really, really good, and I think that is an exaggeration. Just because if you could rely on Astra proccing, it would be. But you can't rely on Astra proccing. Pirates next chapter are good for her. I think you're thinking of chapter 3. That's where the Bridge of Pirates is. And that is good for her, but that's also good for Arden. That's also good for any of the sword cabs, right? There's opportunities for infantry to contribute. But they are, you know, you're looking for them, right? They're fewer than you would like. So, unit review. This guy's bad. This guy's bad. I won't mince words. This guy sucks so much. Not him. So, all of the problems that I've brought up with Azelle, Ira, and, the other infantry people, and Arden and whatnot, apply to Jamke as well. But Jamke is bow-locked. Now, I do think that the Fire Emblem community is oftentimes too harsh reflexively on bow units. In most games, bows have either a niche or can oftentimes be quite good. You know, attacking without a counter is something that comes up with higher quality enemies. Fire Emblem 4 does not really have high quality enemies. They're high HP, they're hard to kill, but they don't actually do that much damage, and typically the best way to deal with a Kaga Square is to park a Juggernaut who can survive multiple attacks and just fight them all on enemy phase. Now, Midir, the other bow unit we have, does have the niche of being able to do sort of hit and run tactics, because of Kanto. And so if you've got a dangerous enemy, in particular, the flyers in chapters 3 and 4 come to mind, but also like maybe a mage or a swordmaster. There's plenty of dangerous enemies that you might want to have Midir like do a hit and run, either chip or potentially kill with skill procs, and then run away. Jamke theoretically can do the first half of that, the hit, because he's got Adept, he's got Onslaught, and he's got Pursuit. Which I believe is actually more skills than Midir. Midir just has Onslaught and Pursuit. But Jamke has more. So, like, he's statistically more likely to hit multiple times. You get that sort of machine gun build, bada 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 bada, hit 1,000,000 times. And combined with the Killer Bow, which grants critical, it's another chance-based ability to deal even more damage. He can just function as a delete button, right? His stats are also marginally better than Midir's, 11 strength and 14 speed in comparison to, after a little bit of training, although he's level 4, so not really after training, 9 and 9. Like, his stats are marginally better. The thing is that if you're relying on skills to get the kills anyway, which I think he is, the minor stat difference doesn't really matter. Both Midir and Jamke's combat performs basically the same, except against some of the toughest enemies. But Jamke can't do hit and run stuff. So, there's only one Killer Bow. A lot of people like to leave it on Jamke, but if you give it to Midir, you'll find that, hey, critical, Onslaught, and Pursuit is enough to delete select targets. You don't also need Adept and 2 more points of strength. And that's before even mentioning, like, obviously the Canto is the big thing that Jamke loses out on, but Midir also keeps pace with everyone, right? Jamke has the same old infantry problems. And the worst thing about Jamke is he's not even a good dad because Pursuit is not a personal skill. So if you want Jamke, if you want to have like an archer father, we're doing Midir Lester, right? Midir Lester gets Pursuit. Jamke Lester does not get Pursuit. So Jamke can't even cope on like being a better father. I think he's arguably... There's one other unit I think is worse than him in Gen 1, but there are only 2 in my tier list. There's only 2 units I put in F tier, and Jamke is one of them. I will say this for him, he does give a very good first impression, because he has a nice starting position, right? He starts out on the front lines, negating that infantry problem of how do you get to the front lines. Well, he's already there, and he starts with the killer bow. He can do some very good combat against these fuckers, right? And I think that if you're just trying to get kills on the killer bow, which I tend to think of Gen 1 as the time that you feed kills to weapons, you're training the weapons for Gen 2, then... yeah, let him get some kills during this segment, right? There's a bunch of hunters, so he can also effectively enemy phase. This is one of the few formations that a bow unit is good at enemy phasing. So he can, once you silence this guy, Jamke can pretty effectively just kill these hunters on his own. So he gives a very good first impression. And as an enemy, he is very threatening. We just saw him kill Dew. And he can do the same thing to a lot of your other combat units. So I understand why people like him, but unfortunately it's just an instance of, especially Chapter 2 is so unfriendly to infantry, and it's immediately after you get him. So it's an instance of the first impression just not holding up.
Yeah.
I didn't do a unit review for her, right? Okay, so Deirdre. She is a shaman. She can use light magic and stabs. She has B rank stabs, which is enough for things like physic. Silence is the big one that she starts with in her inventory, but you can buy a heal staff on her. She can be a healer as well. And having silence in her starting inventory is nice because silence is a very expensive staff, and your other staffers, well, Ethlyn can't use it, but Edane probably doesn't have the money for it unless, like me, you've been shoveling gold down her gullet, right? So silence is useful in a couple of instances in Gen 1. This is the sort of silence tutorial right here. This guy has a siege weapon and you want to use silence to get rid of him. But there's also the infinite use sleep staff, where Deirdre is sort of the intended solution. I don't know if it's the intended solution, but she's the best solution to the guy who just spams sleep over and over again. As long as I believe at base she has enough magic to silence him, although she might need a couple of levels, I can't remember. Now, the awkward thing about Deirdre is after Chapter 2, in Chapter 3, she's not allowed to leave the home castle, and then she gets kidnapped for story reasons, and she's not available for the rest of the game. But one of the cool things about Deirdre, and this applies to Julia and is much more abusable with Julia, Deirdre plays on casual mode. If Deirdre dies, instead of having a death quote, she goes, "Oh no, I've been kidnapped!" And then when you seize the final castle of that map, you'll find her and she's been held hostage in there instead. So it allows you to play much more aggressively with her than you perhaps would with other very frail, like 3 defense, 26 HP, other very frail units, right? One of the big things that comes to mind for me is in that same castle where you've got the guy spamming sleep, there's tons of ballistas sort of guarding him, right? And if Deirdre dies to the ballistas, you kind of don't care because you'll get her back at the end of the next map. In this map, I guess if you're like fighting the hunters and you need her to silence this guy, it can be the same deal. But other than that, there's not that much to say about Deirdre. She can do combat, which is kind of cool. She can go through the arena to get, like, more money for stabs, which is important because stabs are expensive. And you probably want to buy a heal staff with her, even though She's only around for one map. It's nice to have another healer. You do get Lachesis on that map, so it's not desperate, but I like buying a heal staff with her. And I like just sort of having her as another healer. Even if she were around for longer than those 2 maps, she would sort of run into the same problems that Edane does, where as the infantry healer, it's harder for her to get to the people that need the healing. Circlet also provides Miracle and Renewal. Here it's called the Heal skill, but and that's kind of cool, I guess. Renewal can be good for, like, abusing your HP to get into Miracle range for the arena. If you really want to, like, in a ranked run, if you really want to, like, min-max her in the arena, you can do some bullshit to get her in Miracle range and make sure she gets experience, because she counts for the experience rank in ranked runs. So she's a much more interesting unit in ranked runs in that she's temporarily around and you want to pump experience into her. But in a casual run like this, I don't think she's got too much going on. She passes the heal staff to Julia. She does not. So Deirdre, despite being the mother of Seliph and Julia, Deirdre does not actually, she does not actually impact the children at all in terms of inheritance. Julia will not inherit any items from Deirdre, and while both Seliph and Julia get the skill Nihil, their stats are not affected by Deirdre's stats. Normally, stats have a minor impact on their children's bases, and then obviously a significant impact on the growth from the growths. But in terms of the final stat that a parent ends up with has a very minor impact on their child's starting stats. But Deirdre does not have that effect, and because her children are fixed, obviously her growths don't affect their growths because their growths are fixed. But she doesn't pass items down to Julia either. There's no inheritance interactions for her, which is relatively unique. I think she's the only Gen 1 character for whom that's true. Because Ethlyn and Quan, even though they have a fixed parent, Ethlyn and Quan, even though they have a fixed parent, like, they do pass down their base stats, impact the base stats, and their inventory gets passed down as well. She affects Selif's growths. I mean, you can look at it that way, but Selif's growths are always going to be the same. He never has a different mother. So I don't really think of it as, like, her growths impacting their growths, in the same way that I don't really think of Quan and Ethlyn's growths impacting Leaf and Altana's growths. Because Leaf and Altana and Julia and Seliph will have the same growths in every single playthrough, since you can't avoid these parents. I think the only times that, like, it's worth talking about the growths being impacted by the parents' growths is when you have a choice. You can change who the parents are, in which case, yeah, there are variable growths, but every single playthrough, Seliph will have the exact same growth rates because he has the same mom. So you could argue, okay, she does give growths to Seliph, but I would also argue, like, she doesn't really. Seliph always has those same growths. Do her stat gains not affect Seliph? They do not. Usually, stat gains would affect the parent, or would affect the child. I forget if it's just the primary parent, or if it's both parents. I think it's both parents, but I might be confusing Awakening and Fates. But in Deirdre's case, her stats do not affect Seliph or Julia. Julia is straight up a static unit. And so is Seliph, like, except for the fact that his inheritance from Sigard includes Sigard's base stats and Sigard's inventory. But Julia is straight up static. Like, she's not impacted at all by anything. It's both parents, but the secondary parent has a smaller effect. That's what I thought it was, but like I said, because there's 3 different games with different inheritance systems, then I wanted to make sure I wasn't confusing stuff. Sigard should have married Ira instead. Astra Seliph, y'all. Astra Seliph. We could have had Astra Seliph. But aside from that, so Lachesis is a very interesting unit to talk about in terms of how good she is, because she's always a good unit, but how good is going to depend on how much you care about turn count. Because this is a trainee. She starts as a level 2 princess, which is an infantry staff and sword class. She can use A rank swords, much like Ira and Sigard, so you can immediately give her the silver sword. And she starts with the prayer sword. The prayer sword and the earth sword are female only swords, and they're pretty good. The prayer sword gives miracle, and miracle, as we talked about with Finn, is a very good skill in Fire Emblem 4. For those who need a refresher, rather than being chance-based, it ups your avoid at low HP, and you can get up to 100 extra avoid, depending on how low your HP is. The Earth Sword is essentially Nosferatu, but it only has 10 durability, so it's shit. Because it's super expensive, and it's garbage. But the Prayer Sword is very good, and it can only be wielded by women. Female sword users are pretty rare. It's Lachesis and Ira in Gen 1, and Aaron. Aaron is also a sword user. So it's the three of them are the only female sword users in Gen 1. I believe Tailtew gets swords on promotion, but you're not promoting Tailtew. Don't fucking meme, you're not promoting Tailtew. So mainly, because her stats are so bad, she's mainly an infantry healer, right? Very similar to Deirdre and Aideen. She only has C rank stabs, so she doesn't even get to do the Aideen thing of like, well, I've got physics, so even if I can't reach, I can still physic people. C rank stabs is pretty rough. She can heal, she can mend, she can return people. But on promotion, she gets the strongest promotion in Fire Emblem, Master Knight. So, I think a lot of people, Master Knight is the best class in the game. And probably the best class in the franchise. But I think a lot of people, like, misunderstand why. Because it looks super impressive. You get huge stat gains, right? Which is great for her combat. And you get access to every single weapon type in the game. Swords, lances, axes, bows, fire, thunder, wind, light, and staves. No dark magic, but no playable unit gets dark magic. So that sounds really cool. However, you can ignore lances, axes, because those are garbage. You don't need them. Being able to use fire, thunder, and wind is nice because you can hit enemies on res. You get 1-2 range. That's pretty cool. The big thing is A rank swords, which she already has. Super big stats, a horse, and A rank stabs. Master Knight is the only way to get A rank stabs on a horse. And that means Master Knight is the only class in the game that can use something like Physic or Restore or Rescue, which is the strongest staff in the game, the best movement staff in the game, while having mounted movement, which is huge. Combine that with the fact that you can do really good mounted sword combat, you can do good mounted magic combat, and you have bows, which are situationally useful, mostly for the arena, because you can use the bow arena, which is easier to go through to get your last 10 levels. But I think that Master Knight would be like 95% as good if it only had swords, staff, and wind. Bows are a nice extra, but like at that point you don't really need to go through the arena other than for money. And lances and axes, the only upside to lances and axes is if you want a brave weapon on her, she could use the brave lance, brave axe, or brave bow, and you can let other people use the brave sword, because the brave sword is the best brave weapon, but a lot of people want to use it. And especially, you know, like Beowolf can only use swords. Ira, if you want to go all in on Ira, can only use swords, right? Even like Alec and Nisha, they can use swords and lances, but axes, if you want a brave weapon on her and you're not using Lex, like, you can give her the brave axe instead. The weapon triangle in Fire Emblem 4 is incredibly strong, but it doesn't matter because of just how unbalanced the weapons are in terms of their weight and their hit and stuff. I guess lances are good for physical 1-2 range. But yeah, it's mostly swords, stabs, and magic. And then, like, bows are good for the arena, maybe shooting down a flyer, although, if we're being honest, she can probably kill the flyers with swords and magic anyway. And then, like, lances and axes give her other options. but she's not the only lance or axe user. I think that being able to use the Brave Lance is more relevant in Gen 2, because in Gen 2, there's far fewer lance users. In Gen 1, we have Finn, we have Alec, we have Nisha, we have Quan, we're gonna get Aaron, we're gonna have a lot of lance users, right? But in Gen 2, being able to use a lance is a lot more exclusive. Still, very, very... the reason that I say how good she is depends on how much you care about turn counts is because the quote-unquote ideal way to train her up is through staffing. You could train her by, like, trying to do her combat, which is really bad, or you can do what I'm going to do, and at the end of this chapter, you have some stupid little shithead like Nisha go into the arena over and over and fail over and over, and when you fail the arena, you get at low HP, and then Lachesis doesn't get experience by hero staffing him. And she does that all the way until promotion, and then she's instantly promoted at the start of chapter 3. That's what I'm gonna do, and that's what I would recommend you do in a casual playthrough. However, if you care about turns even a little bit, if it's a ranked playthrough, if it's an LTC, or if you're just challenging yourself to take fewer turns, that takes like 100,000 turns. So she's going to become a Master Knight a lot later if you train her more, like, without abusing grinding and stuff, right? Now, Ethlyn, as your mounted staffer, leaves at the end of chapter 3. So I do think that even if you care about turns, you should really try to get Lachesis promoted before the end of chapter 3 so you can have a mounted staffer in chapter 4 and chapter 5. And that is part of also what elevates her is like, well, if Ethlyn's going bye-bye, I would like someone who can staff my horse units, right? I'd like someone who can keep up with everyone to heal them. But regardless of how you choose to use Lachesis, as long as she promotes, she's gonna be phenomenal. It's more a matter of, like, when is she going to promote, right? Also, she has Charm. This is pretty cool. It just boosts hit and avoid by 10 for everyone within 3 tiles. I like it. It's... One of the cool things about Charm is it stacks with itself, but unfortunately there's only one Charm user in Generation 1, and it's Gen 2 where you can stack multiple uses of Charm and get up to 30 hit and avoid. But it's a nice little buffer. If you can get her, like, around other people, she can bolster them, and that's kind of cool. So we have 2 new units, and they're both pretty good. Well, one of them is very good. This is Sylvia, the dancer. Like other infantry units, Sylvia does face infantry movement problems. She has 6 move instead of 5. So she's better off than Arden and the mages. But 6 move compared to, like, yeah, we don't need to keep going over and over and over about you lag behind, roads accentuate the problem, the large number of turns accentuates the problem, right? However, Sylvia, as the dancer, you are incentivized to try to make sure she can keep up with your army as best as possible. When you get the rescue staff, rescuing Sylvia is almost always the best thing you can do with it, because it pulls her forward and keeps her up with everyone. Rescue can only be 10 spaces wrong, but it's well worth it to yoink her forward. Even before the rescue staff, just having Sylvia dance for 4 units, like on turn 1, advances your army a lot. You can do a thing where you have 4 units set up, because she dances 4 units at a time, all 4 squares. It's a 4-way dance, similar to, like, Rayson when he's transformed, but it's always on. You can do a thing where turn 1, everyone moves out of the castle, you send Sylvia, you dance. Turn 2, the infantry has fallen behind, Sylvia can dance the infantry, and they can catch up. And then turn 3, she's a little bit behind, but if you can get her close to the front lines, you can also do, like, Canto dance type deals, where, say you have Sigard kill someone, then Canto backwards, Sylvia dances for him, and then he gets to take another action, right? So, combining Canto with dancing for sort of advanced hit-run situations can be really useful. Having her just sort of bolster people ahead on the first turn and then get people to catch up on the later turns can be good. You also get the leg ring, which is +3 move, and that puts her on par with cavalry if she has it. Now, in Generation 2, I think the leg ring is better on a cavalry unit to give them 12 move, because you can always rescue Staff Sylvia forward, but in Gen 1, it's harder to rescue her around. Well, not Sylvia, it would be Lean or Layla in Gen 2, but you know what I mean. But in Gen 1, it's harder to rescue Sylvia, because you don't get rescued until either Chapter 4 or 5, depending on what Aideen conversation you're going for. And in those cases, I think Sylvia makes really good use of the leg ring just to keep up with everyone. You also get the Night Ring, which can give an infantry unit Canto, and Sylvia is, once again, the best recipient of that because she can dance a group of people and then Canto to safety. I also think, I say that Gen 1 is really the time for leg ring Sylvia. If you have an early rescue staff in Gen 2, then I don't think you need leg ring on your Gen 2 dancer. But if you do not have the early rescue staff, and we are not going to, because chat voted for Edane Midir, which does not give early rescue. We won't have rescue until Chapter 9. Without early rescue, I do think that leg ring on Dancer, even in Gen 2, is probably the best thing to do, just so that she can keep up with your cavalry units. She does also have Miracle and Adept combat skills, because she can use C-rank swords. This is more useful than you would think, not because she should be seeing combat outside of the castle, but because with Miracle in particular, Adept is whatever, but with Miracle in particular, Sylvia can cheese her way through the arena. Now, her experience doesn't matter unless you're doing a ranked run, but her money does, because the Night Ring and Leg Ring are very expensive items for Sylvia to have to purchase. And so the more money she can get by going through the arena, the less you have to send her to villages. Also, Broderman, thank you so much for the $5 donation. Have I considered leg ring Arden gaming? Did that pop up? It did pop up on screen. Okay. I have considered footleg Arden gaming, and I think that that's, you know, just, it's a bit too peak. It's a bit too peak. I'm just kind of cringe, is what it is. She needs a sugar daddy. She can also benefit from marrying just to get money. Now, we are doing substitutes for her children. That's what chat voted on. But even if you're planning on doing substitutes for Sylvia, I do think it's worth marrying her to someone just to get that extra money, because you can get the substitutes by killing her off in the end of Chapter 5. If she dies before the end of Chapter 5, you still get the substitutes. So even if you're planning on doing substitutes for Sylvia's children, which I do think is a valid, like, I think that's the only sub pair where there is a legitimate reason to go substitute instead of it just being strictly worse. I wouldn't say it's strictly better, it's a side grade. I personally prefer the substitutes to her children, but there are valid reasons for both, especially in a no rescue run. The money Sylvia passes down to Lean is really, really valuable if you don't have the rescue staff available, because it lets her get the rings sooner. Or you can just pass the rings to her as well. Meanwhile, if you have rescue, I do think that the extra skills you get from Lean and Charlot are nice. But even if you're going for substitutes, I do think that marrying Sylvia just to get access to extra money from someone who doesn't really need money themselves, someone like Lex, Alec doesn't need a lot of money, Beowolf gets a lot of money on recruitment, and he doesn't need that much. If you're not doing Beowolf Lachesis, which we're not, actually, I might marry Beowolf to Sylvia just for the money, now that I think of it, because someone paid for the gene pairing, right? So Beowolf isn't marrying Lachesis. I would not recommend this if you're trying to do, if you're trying to use Nana instead of Jean, but since we have been forced against our will to use Lachesis' substitutes instead of her children, I think that Beowolf is going to be a very good husband for Sylvia, because he gets a lot of money and he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it at all, but he gets paid $1 bajillion to join us. But yeah, Dance are good, you know, more than 11. Lewyn is a little bit more complicated to talk about. He is a better mage than Azelle, with a worse payoff, but you can at least actually fucking use him as opposed to Azelle, who, like, ugh. Lewyn does not have Pursuit, So in order to double and kill things, he needs to rely on gambling. He is adept and critical. Either of these going off, it's the same deal that we've been talking about with Jamke and Midir and whatnot. He unfortunately has fewer chances than them because he doesn't have Pursuit. Although if you can get him the Pursuit Band, I do think he's probably the best Gen 1 user of the Pursuit Band. Because Wind is incredibly light. 2 weight. He's fast. He has 14 AS right now. He can actually double stuff. And so he, unlike Azelle, can actually kill, like do significant damage to, or even kill enemies just by doubling them with magic. The downside is, of course, he is always an infantry unit. Unlike Azelle, where you struggle through, 3 or 4 maps of dragging around your 5-move shitter, and he gets a horse. Lewyn starts with 6 move, which is pretty cool, but he doesn't get a horse on promotion. And that is, again, like it's FE4, the low movement really stings. And unlike Sylvia, giving the leg ring to an infantry unit who is not a dancer just does not feel worth it. You get 1 unit who can keep up, right? But even a combat unit as competent as Lewyn, and he is way more competent than he appears because of his PRF weapon, even a combat unit as competent as Lewyn is just not worth giving the leg ring to just to keep up, when you could give it to your dancer, or you could give it to a horse unit to give them 12 move, right? Which snowballs because of the way that roads work. Now, midway through Chapter 4, Lewyn gets access to Forsetti, which is the second holy weapon that we're going to get. It boosts his speed by 20, skill by, I believe, also 20, and has 30 might. That's very fucking strong. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve Lewyn's primary problem, which is that he's still a foot unit in Fire Emblem 4. So while it bolsters his combat, and while the Pursuit Ring bolsters his combat, I do think those are both very good items for Lewyn. Ultimately, they don't solve his biggest problem, which is his movement. And it just sucks. Like, it's not a bad unit, right? I don't want to give the idea that he's a bad unit, but he is, he struggles. He struggles to reach the front lines. He starts in a pretty good situation because he's in the right spot to kill these brigands, right? But in Chapter 3, there is stuff for infantry to do. In Chapter 4, not really. And Chapter 5, a little bit. But he's gonna struggle to accomplish tasks that you want. Even here in Chapter 2, yeah, he's good for killing these brigands. The next combat castle we have is here. We have to drag his 6-move ass all up. Then we go here, and then we go here, and then we go here, and then we go here. All the way like that before you can fucking do combat, right? And you could use the return staff to send him home, but then we gotta drag his 6-move ass all the way over here. So either way, it's a struggle. Ultimately, I think he's better as a dad, specifically because he can pass Forsetti down to a horse unit of his own. But, it's still got very good combat. Just, I wish that I could actually make use of those combat stats. I don't know. But we should probably talk about Beowolf, shouldn't we? So, Beowolf is really interesting, and I think he's sort of the perfect example of why looking at units in a vacuum doesn't necessarily give, like, the full picture, and isn't the best way to evaluate them. So, on paper, Beowolf has everything that you need to be a good unit in Fire Emblem 4. He's on a horse with 8 movement. He has B-rank swords, which is high enough for the Brave Sword. He has Pursuit, so he can double things. He has Onslaught, which is just an extra damage skill. It's basically a reliability buffer, because if he gets an extra round of combat, he can do extra damage. So he can hit people a lot of times, because Onslaught will, trigger more because his AS is higher because he uses swords. And his stats are also pretty decent. 14 strength, 11 skill, 11 speed, 3 luck, 10 defense, 0 res, but that's not abnormal for Generation 1 especially. Nobody can really kill mages.
So on paper, he seems like he'll be really, really good. He even starts with an extra 10,000 gold. You have to pay him 10,000 gold from someone else. And normally when units cost money, I do penalize them for that. But in Beowolf's case, I don't. I actually reward him for it because of the way that Fire Emblem 4's gold system works. You aren't actually losing any resources. Instead, the resources are getting funneled into him. So he automatically gets sort of that extra bit of favoritism where whoever you don't like, whoever you think is smelly, like we did with Alec, gets to give Beowolf all their money. And Beowolf becomes the Omega Chad while whoever else they is poor, right? So then he can buy stuff like the Paragon Band, like the Brave Sword. His stats are also pretty decent, especially compared to the scrubs that start near him. It's kind of like the meme of like, identify the recruitable unit. Like, look at just how much worse the other Free Knights are. So Beowolf should, in theory, be a very good unit, but he ultimately just kind of feels middling. He joins late enough in Chapter 2 that, like, the time and place for a filler unit like Beowolf has kind of passed. The filler that the Christmas Cavaliers provide, I actually find much more valuable because that's the point where, like, you're getting kills on your strong weapons, you're still training Finn up, you're still potentially training other projects, which would include the Christmas Cavaliers. Meanwhile, when Beowolf joins, he actually has worse stats than my trained Christmas Cavalier, doesn't he? Yeah, he has slightly worse stats than my trained Alec, and Alec is thought of as being not a particularly good unit. Alec is thought of as being held back by his lackluster stats, but this Alec is just better than Beowolf statistically. It's not a blessed Alec either. This is like, I'm not playing on an average growth patch, but just to give you the example, Nisha also probably worse than Beowolf, I would say, at this point, but I haven't been training him, right? The fact that he's close enough like that speaks volumes to just how kind of mediocre Beowolf's stats are at join, and his growths aren't terribly impressive either. Like, they're not bad. If you use him, he'll be good. But the Christmas Cavaliers get lances, which are usually worse than swords, but just having Jav access, having the ability to use an Iron Lance for extra damage is nice, even if you do get weighed down and not double. Like, oftentimes, what do we got right now? We got 3, 8. So, he's doubling these sword enemies, which is nice, but when you face faster enemies, like in Chapter 4, there's the Wind Mages and the Myrmidons and stuff, Beowolf can struggle to double. And if he's not doubling, he's not really dealing that much damage. I think that when you get him, I prefer him over the Christmas Cavaliers, but I also feel like there's less call for his sort of jobber status at this point in the game. He struggles to double a bunch of enemies for me. He never shines like early game Alec. Yeah, early game Alec is fighting axe enemies. So Alec doubles everything for the first 2 chapters of his career. And sure, in Chapter 3, in Chapter 4, in Chapter 5, Alec is going to be slightly worse than Beowolf, but both of them are going to be significantly worse than Sigard. There's no point in the game where Beowolf is only slightly worse than the better option. I would say Nisha and Alec are slightly worse than Sigard at base. It's just Sigard snowballs so much harder and the gap gets longer and longer. Like Sigard 1-round stuff, whereas Alec and Nisha have to team up to 1 round. But now Sigard 1 rounds with suboptimal weapons. Sigard 1 rounds with the javelin. Sigard 1 rounds with, fucking, like, ridiculous, like, I mean, the javelin's the big one, because that's what I want to feed kills to. But Sigard will run around with, like, the weapons that are not premier weapons, which sort of reaches Beowolf's other problems. Being able to only use swords means the only brave weapon he gets access to is the Brave Sword. The Brave Sword is the best brave weapon in the game, probably the best weapon in the game, but it's highly contested. Everyone and their mother wants the Brave Sword, and so being able to, on promotion, use the Brave Lance is a genuine boon for the Christmas Cavaliers. They have C Lances unpromoted, but they get double B Swords and B Lances once they promote. And so, if you are relying on the Brave Sword, but you decide like, well, I think I'll give the Brave Sword to Sigard because he uses it better, Beowolf just kind of doesn't get a Brave weapon, which kind of sucks for him. Definitely not a bad unit. He does have a few cool things going for him, but very limited. No Jav moment. Yeah, not being able to use Jav kind of sucks. FE4 is not a good game to be on foot. That is an advantage he has. Like, I would say he's better than all the infantry units. Just like offhand, I would say that's probably the case. I would have to consult. I am working on a tier list right now, so these unit reviews are not exactly like the end all be all, just sort of my quick thoughts, but instinctively I would say he's probably the weakest of the cavaliers, aside from maybe Midir. Midir can struggle as like just being bow locked lol. But instinctively Beowolf feels pretty weak and better than all the infantry, but that's just like FE4 in a nutshell. Lord. So this is Aranis. She is the only flyer in Generation 1. In most Fire Emblem games, flight is an upside instead of a downside. Here, it's kind of the opposite. You still have 8 movement and canto like horses, so you can keep up for the most part. But, the thing is, road tiles are pretty over-centralizing in terms of movement. For anyone who was not here when I was talking about the Cavaliers, road tiles give basically an extra 1/3 of your movement. Every movement tile on the road costs 2/3 of a tile instead of costing 1. So if you're able to take advantage of road tiles in the positive terrain, you can move a lot farther by just staying on the road. Flyers don't get to do that. She does get to avoid terrain, which makes sort of forest areas and mountains, like the ability to traverse them, kind of nice. She can go up and down cliffs. However, there are anti-flyer tiles to stop you from going too far out of your way. So basically, like, this right here, these walls, right? They stop us from getting to this castle until we've conquered this one. And Aranis cannot fly over them. For the most part, this doesn't matter because it's basically just like dividing the chapter up into objectives, and it means that Aranis can't go ahead to get a later objective. I think people make way too big of a deal of it than it perhaps deserves. Anti-flying tiles are funny. They are funny. It is undeniably funny, but Aranis in particular really isn't hurt by them. There's a couple of instances where her daughter, Fee, or the substitute unit Femina, can be, but Aranis really isn't. You can notice them if you try to push her ahead farther than she, like outside of the objective space, but there's not really any side objectives that not having anti-flyer tiles would stop, and like, her going ahead would basically just unlock some cheese that doesn't really matter. Her combat's alright. She's got worse stats than Beowolf for the most part, but 18 speed is very good. One thing that I think a lot of people might not initially recognize is she's not a lance unit. She starts with just a lance in her inventory, but she has B rank in swords and lances. So she can use swords and take advantage of that massive speed stat to double a lot of things. I like giving her effective weapons for that reason, because her strength can be somewhat questionable. On promotion, she gets a big magic boon and staff access, so she's also very good at making use of magical swords, especially after promotion, because she will double a lot of things even with the sort of heavier tomes, because at 2 range, the magic swords count as the weight of their tome. So for example, the fire sword counts as fire and will weigh you down a lot, but unlike Azelle, Aranis has really high base speed, so she can double stuff with like fire sword, or wind sword I think is really good on her as well. Able to use the Brave Lance, able to use the Javelin. Loading her up with like a Javelin, a Brave Lance, and a Magic Sword means that she can do pretty good combat regardless of whether you want to hit on defense or res. And her bulk is also not too shabby. 9 defense, 9 resistance. That's roughly equivalent to what our Christmas Cavaliers are at right now as well. She does have to watch out for arrows, you know, watch out for arrows, but there's not too many bow enemies in the first generation. The main thing that kind of sucks is that she doesn't get the road movement, and there's not too many instances where flight is very useful in Generation 1. Chapter 3, there's an ocean that it can be nice to send Aranis across to sort of like help out in the final castle, and in Chapter 4, there's quite a few forests that are nice to avoid, but other than that, well, Chapter 5 has the desert where you can fight meteor mages, but Chapter 5, once you're fighting meteor mages in Chapter 5, the game is practically over, and I don't really value that super highly. It is nice, it's just not as big a deal, IMO. But yeah, she's got
decent-ish combat and decent-ish movement. I think that the uniqueness of flight does open up some strategies that others don't have access to, but all in all, she would prefer to be grounded because look at, not taking advantage of the road. She's stuck pretty far behind, which is a little unfortunate. Okay, clip the bug. Let's talk about Chiluyen, the secret brigand event. Yeah. He's secretly a brigand. No, Chiluyen is another sword fighter. So he is very comparable to Ira in being the kind of frail Myrmidon. He's not as frail as her. I would say of the infantry units, he actually has some of the better combat. He's sort of the one who is the most justifiable to sort of drag around. Because 40 HP, 11 defense is reasonable bulk, and 14 strength, 17 speed along with swords means he's gonna be doing quite good damage output. He has Pursuit as a class skill, and then his proc skill is Luna. I think Luna is a much better proc skill than Astra, because against a high defense enemy, Astra is still not going to kill them, but Luna will. Luna cuts through foes' defense. I believe it's skill percent chance, but the hidden secondary effect, and this is what's really cool, is Luna negates accuracy. So you will always hit as long as you proc Luna. It's the story people tell about Fire Emblem 6, this is untrue, but people used to believe that if you got a critical hit, it went through accuracy. And I believe the reason that rumor was so prevalent was because in FE4, Luna does work that way. If only bro had a horse. It is like, it is the downside, right? It is what sucks. But like 17 skill, 17 speed, 11 defense, 14 strength, and we would have gotten him at the start of the chapter. Obviously I recruited him late, and that's kind of the sketchy thing is depending on how you want to do the arena. I was saving that arena for Finn, for Paragon Finn, so I recruited him late, but you can get him at any point whenever you beat the first arena in this chapter. And so that's pretty epic. This chapter is bad for infantry, but we did just have the infantry slogfest over here. He missed out on it, unfortunately, but it is kind of a good time for him to shine. I also like him fighting these armors up here because I like running past them with Sigard and Quan to try to get this castle as soon as possible. And we did that with the infantry, or we did that with the cavalry, but we could have done that with infantry. Like, they would have reached if I had just bothered. And he's quite good there because there's the stupid general that he can use Luna on. I like him a lot better than Ira, but in infantry only, Ira was better because I invested more in her because she has the opportunity to get trained up more, but I do think that like Holyn just out of the box being a fucking baller is pretty goddamn valuable. Hero Sword Holyn goes hard. He does get the Brave Sword. Well, anyone can get the Brave Sword, basically. But yeah, he can get the Brave Sword. He can use the Silver Sword. He's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Still no horse though, so like there is a ceiling to how good an infantry unit can be in Fire Emblem 4, and I think Holyn and Lewyn sort of like are that ceiling. These are probably the two best combat-wise infantry units in the game, or at least in Gen 1, because Set exists, lol. Let's do unit reviews of the last 3 Gen 1 units though. So, I'll start with Bridget, because she's sort of the, I was talking about, she has a really good first impression, where she spawns and immediately enemy faces 3 hand axe units to sort of, I guess, trick you into thinking she's a lot better than she is. I mean, she is pretty good combat-wise, just, you don't find too many opportunities to enemy phase with her because bow-locked lol. She overall has, like, better bases than Jamke, and she's only level 12, but Jamke gets to benefit from sniper promotion bonuses, which are really, really strong. Just looking at Jamke right now, if he just instant promoted, he would have better stats than her. as a level 12 archer right now. So she benefits from just starting in a promoted class, but the trade-off is that she doesn't get the promo bonuses, so this is sort of as good as it gets. I think the biggest thing that holds her back is she's footlocked and bowlocked, but she gets the Ufel, which is the first legendary weapon you get that you get to keep. It's 30 might, it gives renewal, and I think it boosts like luck or something. Hold on, let me check real quick. Oifey, FE4, Ufel. It gives 10 strength and speed. That's actually like, those are good stats, but it's only 10 of each as opposed to the normal like 20 and 10. It's nice. She can be a really effective player phase delete button. And next map has a lot of flyers, so even without the Ufel, she can get critical hits with the steel bow and kill stuff, which is pretty cool. Bows, of course, have accuracy issues, and Ufel is no different. It only has 70 hit, which kind of sucks. But like 30 might is 30 might, and renewal is cool. I wish it was on someone who wasn't like doing mostly player phase stuff. Plus 10 strength is questionably useful on a weapon with 30 might. I mean, it just means it functionally has 40 might. Like, and 0%, she has 60 attack with the Ufel. That is a lot. Now, FE4, of course, you know, enemy bulk gets pretty high, but 60 kills, like, every enemy who's currently on the map, right? Except for the bosses in one shot. Yeah, this guy, I mean, he goes down to 16 HP off of one hit off of that. And that's without factoring in, like, her growths and whatnot. Because she is still a level 12 unit, so she will grow stats. Like, she will grow. She just, you know, can't promote. But yeah, she's, like, okay. Low availability, footlocked bad, but she can be a delete button. Which is more than I can say for the other two units. Tiltu! So, Tiltu has Wrath as her gimmick. So, first off, she's a Thunder Mage, so she can't use Wind, which is a demerit to begin with. But she does at least get to use Thoron and El Thunder, just immediately without needing any promotion or anything, because she is A-rank Thunder. 20 might is still pretty good, especially when you hit on res. And Wrath means that if her HP is under half, she will always get a critical hit. Unfortunately, in addition to being held back by being, like, footlocked, if you want to set up Wrath to make her a nuke on the same level as Bridget, good luck. She's really, really frail, and this game loves throwing Kaga blocks at you, where enemies are... You can bait one out, but it's really hard to, especially if they're mounted, then they have more move than her, or even if they're just infantry, they have more move than her, because she's got 5 move, because armor movement. So it's hard to safely set up Wrath and then get her, like, out of danger. When you have it, it's, like, nice, but it's a lot of work for, like, not that much payoff. I don't generally like a unit who, like, is just trying to be a nuke and is footlocked in this game. Because, like, you know, footlock bad, obviously, but even amongst the footlocked units, she starts out, again, in a situation that shows off her tools, where she and Claude sort of balance each other out, where she rat kills things and he heals her up. But very, very quickly, I think you'll find that she falls behind the army, and much like Azelle, like, struggles to catch up, but at least Azelle had some opportunities to do stuff in... Like, this is a big infantry map with the sort of splitting your army up. Azelle did stuff here. He killed, like, 2 enemies. And Tiltu misses that. Whereas, like, next chapter's not really big for infantry, and chapter 5's not really big for infantry, and then the game's over. So I just don't really think she, like, does much. She's also an Est. Like, these stats are not good. Even with Wrath, she's going to not one round, like, every enemy until you give her some levels. And she struggles in the arena. So it just becomes, like... I mean, she can cheese the arena with Wrath until she can't, because enemies get really bulky and they can survive her Wrath crits eventually. 60 attack, though, before enemy res, if Wrath is online, is pretty cool. And then there's Claude. Claude has, weirdly, one of the highest magic growths. He makes a really, really good magical dad for either Arthur or especially Ced, because Ced already has Pursuit. The biggest thing that holds him back is no skills. Not only does he not have Pursuit, but he doesn't have any other combat skills to sort of make up for it. And he's only got C rank in every weapon type. I do like giving him the Wind Tome, just because he's someone who, like, has stats, even though Azelle, like, theoretically could have a horse. The horse is fraudulent. The main thing that he has going for him is Valkyrie's Staff. We let Ira die, and I just didn't want to reset, so I'll show off how Valkyrie works. But in the home castle, you can revive a dead unit, and because it's repairable, you can do this multiple times. The only deciding factor is how much gold he has. He has 10,000 gold. I believe Valkyrie is 30,000 or 25,000? FE4 Val. Not Valflame, Valkyrie. It's 30,000. Okay, so you have to pay 30,000 every time you want to revive someone after the first time, but I think that is a pretty big game changer. If you're doing like an Iron Man, and you allow Valkyrie, because some people ban Valkyrie from Iron Mans, but if you're doing an Iron Man and you allow Valkyrie, it can be a lifesaver. But also just like in casual runs like this, Ira died and I was like, I kind of don't want to reset. We'll just use Claude, right? And then he can use any staff in the game. So like, he starts with Fortify, which is one of the premier A rank staffs, but he can use Physic. He can use the Warp and whatnot. The big thing is, you know, because he's not on a horse, he's not going to reach your primary combat units, but I don't know, all three of these units not being on a horse is like the biggest thing that hurts them. But it's also, at least with Claude, as a healer and as a healer who can use like long range staffs, he can kind of make up for it. The other two kind of struggle too. The way that I'm going to do Gen 2 unit reviews is later this year, hopefully later this year, there will be a tier list, like an FE4 tier list coming out on my channel. And that's going to go over the various pairings possible and sort of like evaluate a unit and be like, you know, this is what Lex Ira would be like, this is Holyn Ira, you know, let's take a look at different possible pairings. In this instance, though, we have specific pairings for our specific units, and so for the unit review, I'm just going to be talking about the pairing we got. So, in our case, this is Midir Lana. Right here, this is Midir Lana. So I'm only going to be talking about Midir Lana. I won't be talking about the utility that she can bring to the table as, like, a Claude child or an Azelle child or those sorts of things. I will instead just be highlighting the specific one we have. Because, like, the unit reviews are less in-depth, right? If you are interested in pairings that I'm not talking about in this stream or this video compilation, just, you know, subscribe, look for the fucking tier list when it comes out, hopefully towards the end of this year. I'm also working on a Radiant Dawn one, so no promises. Those are the two lists that I'm currently working on, and patrons have voted for me to prioritize Radiant Dawn, so I will be prioritizing that one. Anyway, unit reviews. Seliph. Seliph's really fucking good. Probably the best unit in Gen 2. So, he starts out as a Lordling instead of a Lord, or a Bounty Lord, or whatever Sigurd's class is in this new translation. Which means that he is unpromoted. He only has sword access, and he doesn't have a horse, so he's only gonna have 6 move, and he's not gonna have Canto until he gets to level 20 and promotes, at which point he becomes Sigurd's class. He gets the extra stats from Sigurd's class, he gets the horse, he gets lance access, which is nice for javelins, basically just javelins, but I guess horse slayer as well. It's basically just javelin access, though, that matters. The big thing that makes Seliph good is a term that I dub Seliph Syndrome, which is where there's a unit that you give a ton of favoritism. You'll notice that I had him inherit the Paragon ring, I had him inherit 3 stat boosting rings, including the leg ring, the Brave Sword, which has 48 kills on it right now, the Thief Sword to help him get money, so that's like a ton of favoritism, but he's sort of the best person to give that favoritism, both because once he grows up and becomes a Sigurd Lord, he can
kill the boss and seize all in one fell swoop, which is super useful. But also because Tearfing, which he will get towards the end of chapter 10, is really nice in that it gives a 20 res bonus. And endgame is full of magical enemies and status staff, so having that super high resistance is really nice, just for not getting put to sleep, being able to shrug off Midir, shrug off Fenrir, that sort of stuff. It's also just really easy to hand in the best stuff because Sigard is so dominant in Gen 1 that Sigard gets a ton of gold, he gets a ton of items for free. I think Sigard is the best user of the Brave Sword because I tend to think of Gen 1 as the gen where you're setting up weapons, you're getting kills on weapons, and so you want to get kills on the good weapons, you're going to give them to your best units. That's usually Sigard, sometimes Lachesis, sometimes, well, not Lex because he doesn't have axes, or he just has axes. So, like, Quan is another one, and that's one of the reasons why, like, Altena gets good stuff sometimes, but as far as Seliph is concerned, it's just really easy for him to get these items because Sigard gets them basically for free. And he also uses them arguably the best. Giving favoritism to the Lord is barely favoritism. I mean, in some games I would say it is. You know, like Ike, Roy, Eliwood, Erica. You know, the Lords who can be good with favoritism but don't necessarily end up better than other people. No, maybe Roy and Erica were bad examples there, but there are some games where, like, giving the Lord super favoritism helps them skyrocket, but not necessarily better than other people. But at the same time, in this one, I do think that there is a huge benefit to being the Lord, and to being able to, basically, once you seize a castle, it eliminates all the foes associated with that castle. So this castle right here, this is Castle Ganesha. If we kill the boss of Ganesha and seize in the same action, which once Seliph promoted he can because he has Kanto, all these guys disappear. So functionally, Seliph kills one person and wipes out an entire battalion. And in that manner, it's really nice to just sort of give him the favoritism to be able to do that, because he can kill one guy and just, boom, everyone else is dead too. Plus you need to get him to the castle anyway, like he needs to seize, and he will get good if you train him, so you might as well, as opposed to, like, you know, 11 Martha Roy, where they need to seize, but let's be for real, they're never gonna be fucking dominant. So I don't necessarily think it's just because he's the Lord that makes the favoritism earned, because there's other people who I would say benefit from Seliph syndrome that aren't Lords. Sort of the iconic example, and I think it's overstated both in terms of how much favoritism she needs and how much she benefits from it, but Radiant Dawn Jill is a big example of a unit who, like, makes very good use of some favoritism if you pour it into her, and oftentimes has a better argument for that favoritism than others. I would also say Astrid from Path of Radiance, because Paragon increases bonus experience. So there's, like, non-Lord examples. But yeah. It's just sort of, you know, he makes very good use of favoritism. And then he just fucking steamrolls everything. Not too much to say. He has Nihil, which, it means he can't be crit, but, like, enemies very rarely have crit on you. I guess technically the biggest thing about Nihil is once he's promoted, he doesn't take effective damage from horse effective weapons, but I'm struggling to think of very many horse slayers in Gen 2. I think there's a platoon of wyverns in chapter 9 that has them. But, like, the biggest, most iconic horse slayer is on the boss in chapter 2, and, like, that's Gen 1, right? So I don't really know. There's probably an instance for Nihil on Seliph coming up. It doesn't stop Adept, which is the real shame, because Adept is the most annoying skill on enemies, because that fucking bolting guy has it, which is so stupid. But I don't know, maybe there's some cases for it. I guess if you, if you, like, pass down, oh no, because it doesn't stop a cost either, because I was thinking, like, red units, right? Like, if you pass down a skill to, like, Bridget's kids, but, like, that doesn't do anything. I can only think of the Ridersman boss in Gen 2, and it's the boss Ares comes from. Oh, right, yeah, the boss. Well, I mean, is Seliph... If you hyper-focus Seliph, he's probably mounted by then. Yeah, there is that guy. You're right. But yeah, Nihil's kind of a meme in this game, TBQH. Pursuit is nice, though. Like, Pursuit is most important skill in the game. Not the best. I would say Paragon's the best skill in the game, but Pursuit's most important. Speaking of Pursuit, though, the Sword Twins, because they're still Myrmidons, they still have Pursuit. So, unlike most substitutes, they're not, like, so hamstrung by the fact you don't get, like, the original children, right? I will say, like, Serinde is definitely worse than Larcy. You don't have, Astra, and you don't have whatever other skills you can pass down, either, you know, Luna, or Critical, or Accost. Like, the way that Larcy kills people is just by proccing skills, and you stack a bunch of proc skills on her. Serinde can't do that because she just has Pursuit, and the raw offenses of a female Myrmidon are not great. She has a 40% strength growth and a 40% speed growth. That's a higher speed growth than Ira, but as is the case with Ira, it's basically the speed base that matters. I made the case in Gen 1 that Ira's combat is not actually all that good. She just sometimes kills things above her weight class with Astra. Serinde is basically Ira, but without Astra. And that's pretty sad. It's not too much of a downgrade, though, because if we're being for real, Larcy is not doing much after Chapter 7. There are some jobs for infantry in the Gen 2 chapters and, like, the mid-game and late-game Gen 2 chapters. So, you know, I will miss not having Astra, but if we're being honest, like, Serinde is just gonna be whatever. I'm not heartbroken about this pairing. Dalvan might actually be better than Ulster. The big thing about, I guess I should say, no, the big thing about Serinde also is she can't inherit better weapons. She's just got the Iron Blade, which, like, 60 hit is not great. Whereas, like, Larcy can get the Silver Sword. You probably don't give her the Brave Sword, but you can give her, like, the Thief Sword. I tend to like to give some of the good swords to Larcy, just because she can eventually sell them to Oifey. Whereas here, I had to load Seliph up with all the good swords, Seliph and Fee. Just because you can't pass them down to Larcy. So, like, one of the bigger things Larcy does, basically, is just be a bank, a safety deposit box for Oifey. I believe in 0%, I gave Larcy the Thief Sword, had her sell it turn 1, and then Oifey stole, purchased it, which is kind of cool. And Serinde can't do that. She's just stuck with the Iron Blade. And if you want to use Larcy as a unit, giving her the Silver Blade, or the Silver Sword, or Silver Blade, fuck it, why not Silver Blade? And just having her, like, actually have good combat because of having a good weapon is cool. Dalvan, I think, is better than Ulster. Ulster often struggles to inherit swords unless he specifically has the gladiator Holyn as his father. He's not going to be inheriting too many good weapons, so he misses out on the inheritance that Larcy would get. And his stats are just kind of like whatever, the same deal as her. Dalvan is, I mean, chat said Dalvan is bulk focused, but he and Larcy both have the same defense growth at 30%, and he only has 10% more HP, so I don't think that's actually true. But he has Vantage, which is kind of cool, and if you give him a crit weapon, then he can do, like, Vantage crit stuff, potentially. He's not so bulky, like, Lex is the bulky Vantage unit, right? Who, he can take a bunch of hits, and then he can kill stuff with Vantage before they hit him even more. Dalvan is kind of a fragile Vantage unit, and his strength growth is only 30%, which is not particularly good, but if you give him a crit weapon, like, I can see him doing stuff with crit Brave Sword or something. Is it the best use of the crit Brave Sword? Abso-fucking-lutely not, but it's more than fucking Ulster does, and it's something. I also think, like, Ulster and Dalvan are units that really only shine in the first two chapters, Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. So, having Vantage in a situation where, let's actually see how much damage is he dealing. He has 22 attack. These guys have 8 defense, so 22, 8. He's dealing 16 damage, right? Am I doing that math right? No, I'm doing that math wrong. 2, 6, 14 damage. He's doing 14 damage to these guys. So 14, 28. He's 4-rounding them. Wow. Okay, never mind. I was going to see if, like, maybe Vantage helped him go from taking 2 hits to taking 1 hit, but no, he 4-hit KOs them. So, like, Vantage doesn't actually save him. Vantage only helps you if you're killing in an odd number of hits. Wow, even against the Chapter 6 units, Vantage doesn't help him. That's really sad. Okay, well, I guess give him a crit weapon if you really want to cope on the Dalvan stuff. The Sword Twins absolutely suck against these guys. I mean, I also think that's the case for Ira's kids. It's just that sometimes they can get lucky and proc Astra, or you can give them the Silver Sword. Because, like, I don't think Seliph wants the Silver Sword. It's whatever. Wow, the Sword Twin... The Sword subs absolutely suck. That's so sad for him. Yeah, I was trying to be optimistic about Dalvan, but he's probably still better than Ulster, but, like, he's probably still better than any Ulster other than specifically Holyn Ulster, because Holyn Ulster can pass down swords. No, I am not fucking coping on the Thunder Sword or the Silver Blade. Yeah, so that's that. Last but not least, certainly fucking not least, Lana. Lana's function in Gen 2, she has 2 major functions, and I think they're both useful. The less glamorous, less cool one is she's your staff bot for like a chapter and a half, because Nana or Jean will show up in Chapter 7, but like is separated from your group, so Lana's really the only healer for a couple of maps. And that's nice. Like, her being a foot healer means that, unlike Edane, who has to contend with the fact she's always facing off against a horse healer, Lana getting a couple of maps where, like, she's the only healer is nice. And she can inherit some good stats. Like, we gave her Restore, we gave her Physic, we gave her Warp, we gave her Heal, we gave her Silence and Sleep. And I gave Bargain to repair them as well. So that's nice. But I think the more glamorous thing is that she can inherit staves from the Gen 2 people, and she can only inherit B rank staves, but that's more than Jean can. And since Leaf is going to promote into a Master Knight and get A rank staves, getting a Physic to be able to hand to Leaf once he promotes, getting a Sleep to hand to Leaf, getting Silence to hand to Leaf, like, there's some good B rank staves. Sure, it would be nice to get Rescue if you did the appropriate pairing for it, but I still think there's a lot of value in just getting the B ranks early. Also, starting with Physic does help to mitigate the foot unit issues, because she can still contribute from the back lines. You don't get Physic on Edane until, what is it, Chapter 3, yeah. Chapter 3 or Chapter 2. You don't get it early on, basically, is the point. So just having it, being able to heal people up is pretty nice. Not that much else going on about her. Because we did the Midir pairing, she is not going to have a particularly good magic growth. She gets Pursuit and Onslaught, which is nice if you want to do like magical combat once she promotes, but I think at that point, an infantry mage, like, yeah, there's jobs for infantry, but like, I don't know. By the time you promote Lana, I mean, I still think she's useful as a healer at that point, because she can heal the infantry doing infantry jobs. But, I don't think Combat Lana is the way to go. So, she's aight. And the unit review awaits you, Oifey. The archetype of all time. The archetype of all time. So Oifey is your Jagan. I've already made an entire video about, like, why the Oifey archetype is a joke. But Oifey is your Jagan. Oh, you can probably hear those fireworks. Chat, can you hear the fireworks? It is the 6th of July, after all. Hopefully they're not too disturbing. So, he's your Jagan. He has pretty good bases. 40 HP, 16 strength, 17 skill, combined with 8 luck, so he's, like, gonna hit stuff, especially since he can use swords, although he starts with the Armor Slayer, aka the Ironbane sword. So, like, more hit than the Iron Blade, I guess, but lol. And a Javelin. Not a crit jab, so, you know, washed, absolutely washed. Yeah, but he's a paladin. He has good starting stats. He'll double stuff. If you give him a sword that's not the Armor Slayer, then he'll tend to do pretty good. His growths are like whatever. I think that the reason people are like, oh, you know, he's an Oifey, he holds up super well, is because they looked at his growths and were like, well, these growths are good in a vacuum, but they're not even really that good in a vacuum. He has a 100% HP growth, which is good, but not even, like, the highest for Gen 2 by Gen 2 standards. Meanwhile, he has 40% strength, 30% speed, 30% defense. Bro is not beating the fucking Jaken growths allegations. I guess he has better growths than Dalvan, but is that really the fucking measuring bar? But yeah, compared to any child unit, Oifey is going to scale significantly worse, especially since he's level 15. So, like, his experience gain is going to be pretty low in comparison to others. And he's, like, just a paladin. He has critical, which is cool. And pursuit. Like, pursuit is always nice. I appreciate him. I used him for quite a bit in 0%. I used him for quite a bit in, no swords. And I use him a lot in, like, vanilla runs, like, just casual runs like this one. But he's just a Jaken. Like, he's just fine. Arguably, he's one of the Jakens who scales worse out of all the Jakens in the series, just because of how cracked child units growths can be in a substitute run. Then, well, even in a substitute run, you have Eras, you have Seliph, you have Leaf, you have Altana, although Altana's not very good. But yeah, I don't think Oifey scales particularly well compared to child units, and you will always have at least 3 strong child units, because I'm counting Eras as a child unit since he's Eldigan's kid. Boring as a character or as a unit, I would say he's not really, like, boring as a unit, just sort of, he does a job, he does the classic Jaken job. Like, they include one of these in every game for a reason, because it means that you're not struggling in the early game, and that's nice. And it's not like, when I say he doesn't scale well compared to other Jakens, he's gonna be outclassed by the majority of your army, but it's not like he's unusable by any means. He still has a horse in FE4, and he still has swords in pursuit. Like, it's the Beowolf thing. It's like, what if Beowolf started with actual good stats, right? You have all the ingredients, and he has javelins. Like, I'm planning on, if I had trained up the second crit jab instead of the wind edge, I would have given him the second crit jab. But I decided wind edge would be funnier, so we do not have a second crit jab for him. But honestly, I can probably give him Eras' javelin at some point and, like, train up the other crit jab, maybe. Because, like, crit jab's still a good strategy. He's still got 9 moves, sorry. Like, look at this guy. Yeah, he's good. Oh, Tristan. Oh, Tristan. So, I am already not a huge fan of Dermot. Dermot is the sword cav that Tristan is replacing. And I think he's just kind of like, whatever. Tristan is, what if Dermot did not have charisma or pursuit? I guess technically you can get a Dermot that doesn't have pursuit, but you're not going to. Tristan is a sword knight with critical. Welcome back, Nisha, or Noish, or however you want to pronounce it. In fact, his stat spread is pretty similar. 30% strength growth, 20% speed growth. Are these just Nisha's growths? Let me actually compare them side by side. FE4, Noish, Tristan. They have the same strength growth. Oh, wait, no, that's bases. Nisha has 10% more strength growth, equal magic growth, equal skill growth, equal speed growth. Noish just has better growths overall than Tristan. The one exception is that Tristan has 130 HP growth. And that's like, it's not even because of Holy Blood, he just has 130 HP growth. What a fucking clown goober. What a fucking clown goober. No javelin also, like, just fucking... So, one thing that... This will get highlighted when we talk about Johan versus Lex, but a lot of the units in Gen 2 fill the same role as the Gen 1 units, but the enemy quality is higher and the average player unit quality is higher. So the fact that Tristan is filling Nisha's role, and Nisha was already kind of mediocre in Gen 1, and Tristan is fighting against not only stronger enemies, but also competing with stronger blue units for resources and experience and, I mean, not deployment slots, but just the seconds of my time that it takes moving him around, is such a fucking insult. Because, like, Johan is just like Lex without Paragon and against stronger enemies, and he ends up being mid. And Lex is one of the best Gen 1 units. Tristan being just like Nisha, but no Javelin and against stronger units is, I think that's all I need to say about him. He does get a secret event, as do all the substitutes. And his secret event is actually tied to Javier, or not Javier, the sword guy, Radney, Rotoban. So it's in chapter 7. Okay, after you conquer Magellan Castle, both Tristan and Rotoban must be below level 10. Have Tristan wait next to Rotoban. A conversation occurs. Rotovan gets 2 points of strength and 1 point of skill and 1 point of defense. Tristan gets 2 points of strength, 1 point of speed, and 1 point of defense. Bear in mind, you have to sandbag them and keep them at a low level in order to get these stat boosts. So it's kind of like a catch-22, because Chapter 6 is the best chapter in the game for, like, training the shit squad, because you fight against really, really weak axe units for the majority of the map. All these axe armors, bow armors, axe fighters, right? If you wanted to train up a shitter like Tristan, a shitter like Dermot, a shitter like the Sword Twins, this would be the map to do so. But then you miss out on the secret event. Which, like, it's a total of, like, 4 stat points, so it's not a huge deal. Keeping them under level 10 is not a big deal because it's rough to feed Tristan kills. I mean, that's true, but if you want to feed Tristan kills, this is the opportunity to do it, right? Like, if you haven't trained Tristan and it's halfway through chapter 7, you're not training Tristan. He's not doing anything for you. You think it's hard to feed him kills against the axe fighters? Try feeding him skills against the fucking cavaliers and stuff, right? So it's like, it's probably worse to go for the secret event than just train him on this map. Why train him here when you can just train Seliph here? You can train multiple units on this map. This is the easiest map to train people on. In 0%, which, like, no one's growing in, I trained Seliph, Arthur, and Johan all to level 20 on this map. So, like, it's easy, but, then you miss out on the secret event. I would say the secret event is probably not worth it from a mechanical perspective, but since it's a story-based playthrough, we will be going for it, so I'm gonna have to sandbag him. Probably easier to sandbag him than train him, though, TBH. And then, well, I would say he's the worst of this squad, but honestly, against Tristan, I think Lester's probably better. So Lester is a bow cavalier. We got Midir Lester, so he has sort of the machine gun build. He has Pursuit and Onslaught, and he can use the Brave Bow, which he inherited. Brave Bow is a 100% chance to Adept. So he will always attack 4 times because of Pursuit, and then he can potentially Onslaught in order to extend it to get even more attacks. And even though only 8 strength, only a 14 might weapon, I mean, only a 14 might weapon, but, like, only 8 strength, right? He's not dealing a ton of damage with a single hit. If you add up a bunch of paper cuts, like, death by 1,000 cuts is a saying for a reason, Lester can legitimately kill stuff. He can one round without Onslaught sometimes, and when he procs Onslaught, he can definitely one round. He also gets the Killer Bow for extra accuracy. You know, the 20 extra accuracy is nice, and the potential to crit if you want to stack even more, like, RNG stuff. Although, I personally think the Brave Bow is better, just in terms of, you know, it's a more guaranteed way to kill. But Yeah, he's going to be dealing a lot of damage. He can delete single targets. And because he has a horse, he can do this sort of hit and run tactics we talked about in Gen 1, where you attack and then you run away so you don't have to enemy phase. The problem is FE4, especially Gen 2, is very, very Kaga block focused. A lot of times the enemies will be in big blocky formations like this, like these fellers right here, like these fellers right here. And so it becomes this ordeal where in order to, like, yeah, you can kill one enemy, no problem, but it's generally going to be more worth your time and more productive just to have a unit like Seliph, even the Sword Twins, who can stand there and fight multiple enemies instead of having to just fight one and then retreat. Killing one guy is not a big deal when you've got Arthur and Seliph and Ares and Oifey and whatnot who can stand there and kill like 10 people, 15 people in a single turn. And it just kind of makes Leicester a whatever. Early game, sure, Chapter 6, Chapter 7, it's nice to have this single target removal, especially when training up Seliph. And he starts with an iron bow no matter what you inherit. Although I would say you want to give him both the good bows, because the only other archer is Faval, who kind of sucks and also gets the UFL. So like I think Leicester should always inherit the killer bow, and then if he has a bow parent like Jamke and Midir, he should inherit the brave bow anyway. But even like a non-bow parent one gets all your good bows, right? Because killer bow is the only good bow. And then iron is here just so that if you need to set up a kill, if you're trying to train Seliph or whoever, and you want to not kill, although then Onslaught can sometimes fuck you over. I don't think he's very good. I don't think Zune is very good, but he does stuff, I guess. Arden can pass him bows. Yeah, but when I say a bow parent, I mean specifically like the ones who give the brave bow. Jamke and Midir give the brave bow. Arden doesn't give the brave bow. You can't get the brave bow if Arden marries Aideen. Also, why are you marrying Arden to Aideen? Come on. Get serious, y'all. Julia! Okay, so Julia, another unit review. Julia is sort of the equivalent to Deirdre in Generation 2. In fact, she is Deirdre's daughter, and as a result, Seliph's half-sister, I believe, because she's from Ares. Julia has Pursuit, Adept, and Nihil. And she has the ability to wield all light magic and B-rank stab. So she's sort of equivalent to what if Lana could do combat immediately, right? Light magic's also really good. It's got triangle advantage over all of the elemental magic. And it is just generally better tomes than the animal ones, right? She can get Nosferatu, which lets her sort of act as a Nos tank. She can be another foot healer, which is pretty cool. I think the biggest and coolest thing about Julia is she plays on casual mode. Because she is required for plot things, if you kill her off early, she just gets captured, and at the end of the chapter, which these chapters are very long, but upon seizing whatever the final castle of that chapter is, she comes back, right? So in that way, as a healer, as a sort of like fragile healer, she can take riskier strategies, and she misses out on experience if she dies, but she comes back. So like, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be able to have someone who can just go and silence someone and not worry about the ballistas killing them or whatever. You know, we showed off the Deirdre strategy, right? Julia gets to do that for more of the generation. She also misses a little bit of Gen 2. She misses chapters 9, or sorry, at the end of chapter 9, she gets kidnapped. So she misses chapter 10 and the majority of chapter 11. But then she comes back with the Naga Tome. And the Naga Tome is the only tome that ignores the final boss's damage halving effect. So it is by far the easiest way to kill the final boss. And I think that it's generally like what her role is, right? And I think that's just kind of cool. Pairing her with Sed is her hardest possible pairing. Yeah, because she literally can't marry Hannibal or Charlo, right? So she has this interesting quirk where she actually has no love growth with anyone, but you still get the 5 adjacency points. So if you want to get her married, you can. There's no real benefit to it other than, I guess, sibling crits. Similar to Seliph, Nihil, like, doesn't really do anything for her. It's even less for her than Seliph because, like, God, she can't even take, like, horse effective damage, so, like, what's the point, right? But I think it's mostly there for flavor, like, because it was passed down by Deirdre. And then, like, Pursuit and Adept are cool. She does pretty well in the arena, especially with Nos. Nos is just a very, very good tome. Not much more to say about her. She's the only person who can use Nos. Not even Sed can use Nos. She starts out with nothing in her inventory, but what we can do right here is this talk and give her a staff. So we just got Fee the Pegasus Knight and Arthur the Mage. Fee is one of 2 flyers in Generation 2, and she's basically the only one who... the Windsword got sent to storage. That's unfortunate. She's basically the only one who is around for a significant portion of time. She's also the only kid who can inherit lances, which means that basically, unless you give Finn the Brave Lance, she basically starts with a Brave Weapon for free. There's no competition for it, which is nice. I don't think her combat is particularly good. We have Claude Fee, so she doesn't have any additional skills, but she has a decent magic growth, which I think is nice, because upon promotion, she'll get extra magic, she'll get staff access, and she can already use the magical swords. I was gonna show off that she had the Wind Sword, but that got sent to her storage instead, because too many... I believe it's the Slim Lance and Berserk Edge are her default inventory, yeah. So she just got sent too many things and overflowed into storage. This is the crit jab. This is the 71 kill jab that we're sending to Arion. How does she get the Brave Lance? I don't remember her coming with that. It's inheritance. This is a child unit. But she's the only child unit that can inherit lances. So she basically gets the Brave Lance and any other good lances like a crit jab or, you know, if you trained up the Silver Lance or something for free. I guess Altena can get lances, but like if you're waiting until chapter 9 for the Brave Lance, something has gone wrong. So her only competition for getting good lances is Finn, the only reasonable competition. She faces the same problem that Aaron does of not being affected by roads means that, like, her movement is inherently going to be not as great. But, there's a lot more for flyers to do in Generation 2. Even just in her join map, you can see there's these mountains for her to fuck about with, and she's sort of the easiest way to save these villages. But next chapter is a desert map, and there's a couple of villages you want to save that can be hard to do without her. Then afterwards, there's some mountains to go between and a bunch of forests. And chapter 9 is a big flyer map where there's several mountains and there's a bunch of enemy wyverns that it can be really nice to have a good trained Fee on. Berserk Edge is peak because no one ever gets the Berserk Staff. Well, we're getting the Berserk Staff. Charlo gets it. But the Berserk Edge is cool. It's just part of her starting inventory. It only has a chance to Berserk them, though. I don't really think it's, like, that big a deal, because she can just sell it. It's C rank. Like, you can give it to anyone. Fucking Patty can Berserk Edge people. Yeah, I think Fee, her biggest problem is just that, like, she isn't getting road bonuses, and her combat is not so good as to sort of make up for it, but... she can do decent magic combat. I think she's one of the better magic sword users. You know, in addition to Leaf and Arthur. And she starts out on a mount. There's a lot for her to do. She'll get Adept on promotion as well, because Falcon Knights get Adept, which is cool. And she'll get staff access and be like a mounted staffer. Because we gave Claude to her as well, she'll get B rank stats, so she can do mounted physic, which is really nice. But the star of the show is Arthur. I think this is one of the best units in Gen 2. Not as good as Seliph, but he's a contender. So he is in a very similar situation to Seliph. In fact, I would say he also has Seliph syndrome, specifically Lewyn Arthur. He starts out with Forseti, which is a 30 might tome, and he's level 2. So he can use Forseti as like a bit of a crutch to help his combat out when he's only got the 9 magic. And he doesn't have Pursuit, so he can't double. But he has Critical and Adept, so you can like gamble with Elwind if you want, especially if you have a crit Elwind. We did not go for crit Elwind because I thought there were better things to do. But if you have crit Elwind, he's even better. Even just like leaning on Forseti for combat, it's expensive, which can be a problem, but a lot of Gen 2 units are pretty money self-sufficient, so it can be kind of worth it to spend that money to train him up. Once you do, he becomes basically what Azelle wishes he was. Reddit loves to hate on Forseti. They say it's not good as Seti. Well, you know, Reddit doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. I'm sorry. But sometimes things are popular because they're good. And this pairing is popular because it is very good. Arthur is the best magic unit in Gen 2 because he's the one who has a horse. And so giving him the strongest tome is, you know, just gonna further accentuate him. The problem with the infantry mages, you know, with Corporal, with Sed, with Tinny, with Ahmed, I guess technically, is the same problem all infantry face. Without a horse, they are struggling to reach the front lines. Yes, there are jobs for infantry to do, but those jobs are significantly less important than your forward army. And so you want to give your biggest tools to your forward army. I also think that just having a 30 might tome in functionally chapter 1 of the game is super useful. I would say that if there were a way to pass down other holy weapons to any of the chapter 6 squad, you know, if there was a sword you could pass to Ira's kids, to Ulster or whatever, that would also be the correct choice, just because you give yourself such an advantage over the enemies. And it becomes really, really easy to just pub stomp them and then get to the point where you're promoted. And now that you've promoted early, you continue to have a huge advantage over the enemies. Even in 0% growths, Forseti Arthur was regularly one-rounding Chapter 10 and endgame enemies. He needs the Pursuit Ring in order to double, but like Wrath is guaranteed crit if you're at low enough HP, and then Adept and Critical let you gamble for kills. This is just a really, really fucking strong weapon. And he will sweep through hordes of foes, especially because with Lewyn Dad, he has really high speed, and with a base speed of 30 and a growth of, what is it, 110%? It might be 130 at FE4, Lewyn, Arthur. It is 110%, yes. So he is bare minimum getting 28 extra points of speed per level up. His magic growth is a little bit cringe. His magic growth is cringe, but when you have a 30 might tome, that makes up for it. And honestly, 40% magic growth, like, it's not that bad. It's the same as fucking Forseti said. It's the same as said Seti, whatever you want to call it. The Aaron Forseti one. FE4, Lewyn, said. Because I knew someone was going to bring this up. I'm sorry. No, it is higher than Sed's magic growth. It is higher than Sed's magic growth. Like, I don't know. Arthur is going to hit the kill thresholds you need. He's obviously being trained to use swords on promo. That's the other thing, is he can use magic swords. Like, he does need Forseti to get kills early on. But once you promote him, he can use magic swords and Elwind, especially if you have crit on it. But like the Light Brand and the Wind Edge are very good weapons that you can just give to Arthur and use as your primary combat units, and then only whip out Forseti when you absolutely need the high might and the speed bonus, right? So, I honestly, I think the rise of like anti-Forseti Arthur propaganda stuff is the same as the Rutger haters, right? Where it's just someone sees something popular and decides, well, it must be bad. Therefore, I'm going to work backwards from the conclusion that this thing everyone says is good is actually bad. He can also make money from the arena. Yeah, he can make money from the arena without even using Forseti. Like, just use Elwind, right? Yeah, one of the best units in the game. Like, easy top 3 in Gen 2. I think he's probably better than Ares, but worse than Seliph. But honestly, I can see the 3 of them in any order being reasonable. But those are pretty easily the 3 best units in Generation 2. But we'll talk about Iris when we get to Iris. Iris is also fucking phenomenal. Now the 2 red units, though, right? So Johan and Javier, I'm going to talk about them right now because they are an Aaron versus Samson. They are mutually exclusive to each other. We are getting Javier because of the bidding war. So I'll talk about him first and why he sucks, even though people severely overgas him. So Javier is an axe fighter. He's the only axe fighter in the game. He's level 12. He has like pretty decent base stats, although for a level 12 unit, like when your other people level up, they're going to outclass him quite a bit. The speed is also mostly irrelevant. I guess it affects his onslaught chances, but it doesn't let him double, and his AS is going to be pretty bad. Like, look at this. What is it? 18 weight? So he currently has... I don't know what his chance of onslaughting is. What is it? 16%? Because he uses speed percent, but you have to have higher AS. He's rarely going to have higher AS than foes. Let's look at the enemies here, right? The generic enemies, right? He has higher AS than the axe calves. He has lower AS than Schmidt. He has higher AS than Danan. And he has higher AS than the Ruffians. So he can actually trigger a cost against quite a few people on this map. As soon as the enemies stop wielding axes, which is going to be next map, suddenly a cost becomes a fucking dead skill slot. And he's just a guy who whacks things with 34 attack, which is not that high for FE4 Gen 2 standards, right? His growths are not particularly good either. Let me pull them up to remind myself of them. FE4. Javier. So he has a 40% strength growth. That's Oifey's growth. He has a 10% speed growth, 60% defense growth, so I guess he's supposed to be the defensive unit. Yeah, just sort of like a whatever unit. The big thing people hype up is that on promotion to warrior, he gets bow access. Now, bows are not good in this game for the same reason that I talked about with Lester, but they are helpful in one specific niche, is that the bow arena is 10% speed, yeah. The bow arena is easier to get through than the axe arena. Which means if you want to sort of power level him by sending him through the arena, you can equip a bow and go through. Anytime you would face a sword unit, you're facing a bow unit instead, which is a huge upgrade. And anytime you're facing like what would be a brave axe, it's a hand axe. What would be a brave lance is a javelin. Those sorts of things. So against foes that have to switch their loadout, you do better. And people hype this up so fucking much as like, but Javier gets bows. He can go through the bow arena. He can go through the bow arena. That's so fucking basic. He can go through the bow arena. Two big problems with that. First, in order to get bows, you already need to be promoted. You need 8 levels unpromoted, struggling with the worst weapon type in the game. Well, second worst, because bows are worse outside of the arena. But axes are the worst for leveling up, because they're bad in the real map, and they're bad in the arena. You struggle through 8 levels to promote him and get bows, and then, like, we've gone through the training arc struggle now. Are you really power leveling him after promotion? Let's assume that you get him promoted by the beginning of Chapter 8. I think that's a reasonable, well, I think that's a very generous timetable. But if we get him promoted by Chapter 8, he's facing the Chapter 8 arena. FE4 arena enemies. Let's pull up the FE4 arena enemies for Chapter 8. Start out by facing an axe fighter. You're going to be able to beat that whether you have bows or axes. Next up is a Thunder Mage. He's going to struggle against the Shield Ring Thunder Mage, even with bows. Then you face a Paladin, Steel Lance or Javelin. Honestly, axes might genuinely be better against the Paladin because you have weapon triangle advantage. Then you face either a sword fighter at rank 4 or a bow fighter at rank 4. The sword fighter is definitely a worse matchup, so it takes getting to rank 4 of the Chapter 8 arena before the bows are actually useful, and that's assuming we're even able to beat the mage that probably locks him out. Simply get Wrath proc. You do get Wrath as a warrior, don't you? You do get Wrath as a warrior. Wrath is a good skill, and as a sort of defensively focused, like, defense is his best growth, he has 14 defense, and warrior gives a decent amount of defense on promotion. He could potentially Wrath some stuff. That's not a terrible thing for him to do. That still gives him the struggle of, like, being an infantry unit in the game with the largest maps in the franchise, right? He's gonna face the same problems that Serende and Dalvin do, but his combat is worse. Well, not than Serende and Dalvin, but like worse than Larcy and Ulster would be. Maybe worse than Serende and Dalvin once I buy them good weapons, right? Because they use swords. His combat's bad. His movement type is bad. He's just in a very unfortunate situation, and bows do not save him. Because the only time bows are useful is in the arena or against the wyverns in, like, Chapter 9. And Chapter 8, the end of Chapter 8. Which, like, you have other archers, but it is nice to have additional bows. Do you think he's the worst Gen 2 unit? No, definitely not. Like, Tinny exists, Charlo exists. There's worse people than him. Hannibal, nah, Hannibal's definitely not the worst either. Like, Tinny exists, Charlo exists, you know, same argument. But, like, he's pretty bad. The other, like, very, very funny thing is that the warrior promo gains are actually kind of awful. Because the other minor selling point he has over Johan is his base stats are slightly better. You see, Johan only has 15 strength and 12 speed and 12 defense. Great Knight has cracked promotion bonuses. In Zero Growths, Johan just had better stats than Javier after promotion, which is, it's just sad. It's just sad. Because Johan's very disappointing as a unit. Johan, I think, is the perfect demonstration of, one, how strong Paragon is, and two, how much stronger the cast of Gen 1 is compared to Gen 2. Because Johan is, for all intents and purposes, Gen 2 Lex. He has Vantage, he's a bulk-focused, axe-wielding cavalier. He, if you recruit him, has exclusive access to the Brave Axe, which is also true for Johan, or for Javier, but Javier, like, doesn't make it to the front line so low. In Lex's case, being a bulk-focused Vantage Axe Cav with the Brave Axe was good enough to make him one of the better Gen 1 units. However, that was partially because that was in large part because he had Paragon, and so he could push ahead of the level curve, consistently be over-leveled because he's getting double experience. Which is such a ridiculously strong passive skill. It's hard to overstate just how impactful Paragon is. But I think just comparing Johan's performance as, like, very mediocre filler combat to Lex's performance as just a very dominant physical unit is a good demonstration of that. But I don't think it's just Paragon, because Johan does start at level 12. So he starts with a level advantage over everyone but, like, Oifey. You know, we fed the boss kill to Lester, and he's still level 3. He's very... Paragon ring Seliph is only 8, right? So, like, he's gonna be a higher level than most people for a little bit. So it's not just the absence of Paragon. It's also the fact that Gen 2's cast is, by and large, significantly better than Gen 1. You know, Lex was competing with the likes of Beowolf, Nisha, Alec, and, like, even Finn before the training arc is kind of lame. Meanwhile, Johan is already competing with Seliph, who, like, even at level 8, is kind of just blowing him out of the water. He's competing with cracked out Arthur, cracked out Fee. Like, Fee's only level 2 and she's competing with him, right? We're gonna get Ares and Shannan next map. And Johan just can't compare to those powerful units. So he ends up just sort of feeling incredibly underwhelming. He's competing with Javier. He already lost that competition. Y'all paid for it. Y'all paid for it. But yeah, he is just competing with much stronger blue units and facing off against much stronger red units. Wind mages and sword units were really only a thing in chapter 4. And before that, he was facing off against, like, axe and lance units. Lex, I mean. Whereas, like, Johan is gonna face dark mages next map. We're gonna be facing sword and lance units pretty regularly. Thunder mages pretty regularly. And he just, like, doesn't have the stats to stand up to the much, much tougher foes of Generation 2. I still think he's better than Johan than Javier, because, like, you know, he can actually reach the front lines, right? He can do that sort of bulk-focused Vantage role with the Brave Axe. Whereas Javier's kind of begging for table scraps. But I don't think either of them are particularly stellar. He's a worse... Let's do our unit reviews. Chad has voted we will review Leaf's group first. As I said, we already unit reviewed Finn in Gen 1. He hasn't changed since then. I mean, he's stronger because he leveled up, but that's that. Leaf, on the other hand, is another one of the best units in Gen 2. Just really, really baller. I do think he's sort of a step below, the Seliph, Ares, Arthur trio. Partially because, like, training him up can be more annoying than them. He starts level 1 at the start of Chapter 7. And he doesn't really do anything special until promotion. You know, Seliph gets a ton of favoritism. Ares is already on a horse and already has a holy weapon. And, Arthur, if you give him Forseti, already has Forseti, and he's the, one of only 2, I guess, technically, but Leaf is not a real mage. Mounted mages. Leaf is just a kind of shitty sword unit, doesn't have Pursuit, he has Adept and Critical. But he promotes to Master Knight. If you'll remember Lachesis from Generation 1, she was able to staff grind her way up to Master Knight and sort of like cheat her way past that. Leaf has to do it the old-fashioned way. He is better at combat than she is, but not so much better. I gave him a critical light brand and a magic ring because the majority of the foes that he's supposed to be fighting are armor knights. Now he already has critical himself, but the crit light brand, like, it has 12 more critical, right? So that was sort of my idea with that. And I gave him the Pursuit Ring, which passing the Pursuit Ring to Leaf means you don't get it for chapters 4 and 5, which is a pretty big cost. There's not like a ton of units that want it, but Nisha likes it. Lewyn loves it. Even just like having it for someone like Arden or Lex is pretty cool too. And of course it also means you can't pass it down to Arthur, you can't pass it down to, well, I guess those would be, if you want to do a weird pairing where the kid doesn't get Pursuit and you want to pass them the ring. Like someone mentioned Pursuit Ring Jamke Lex, or Jamke Lester. Someone mentioned Lex, who was it? Not Lex Sword Twins, because they get it by default. Lex Nana, was it? I don't know. There are a few people have recommended like weird pairings that don't get Pursuit normally. And how like, oh, you can, just do the Pursuit Ring stuff. And I do think Leaf is the best user of the Pursuit Ring, but it is a pretty big cost to not only miss it for 2 chapters in Gen 1, but then also have to give it to him for Gen 2. It was just pretty unfortunate. Which is why I tend to think of him as a tier below those big 3, but he still is really, really important. Mounted A-rank staves alone, especially if you have the rescue staff, which in this run we don't, since we did an archer pairing for Aideen instead of a rescue pairing. But you get the brave staff, or you get the rescue staff, I believe in it's either chapter 9 or chapter 10, market. Anyone who remembers, please tell me in chat. But you get it pretty late. But even then, I think its biggest use case is in endgame to sort of skip over some of the evil big walls of status staffs and stuff. It's also a pretty big deal in chapter 9, so whether you get it in 9 or 10 is actually kind of a huge, it's the 10 armory. Oh, that's gonna be really unfortunate. Because chapter 9, there's a few, so the Hannibal recruitment is made a lot easier by having the rescue staff on Leaf, and the Ballista Castle is made a lot easier by having the rescue staff on Leaf, and then you can do a funny cheese where you skip killing Arion, who's one of the more obnoxious bosses in the game, if you have rescue on Leaf. So not having it for chapter 9, I think, is actually a really big deal. It's part of why I don't like the Brave Bow pairings. But c'est la vie, it happened. Yeah, just having a mounted rescue user is really nice, and he's the only possible one, because even if you have Claude give extra staves to either Nana or Aaron, they still only get B rank as opposed to A rank like Leaf, so they can't use rescue. But he also just gets good stats, every weapon type. I think he can do decent magical or physical combat, which is nice. He can use bows and sort of do the bow canto trick where you bow on player face and then equip a weapon that you can enemy face with on enemy phase if you want to like shoot down a wyvern and then fight wyverns on enemy face with a brave sword or something. So once you train him up, he's really, really good. It's just that training can be obnoxious, especially locked down here. Now there is a trick you can do. There's 2 different tricks actually. The first one is this commander will keep going back for reinforcements if you don't kill him, and you can just sort of continuously grind Leaf on these armors and this mage that keep respawning. Or I don't think he even goes back, they just spawn from the castle until you kill the commander. And if you do that, then you can just sort of grind him for a while Seliph's army is doing this whole shebang. The other option is if you pass the return staff and return ring down to Nana, which we didn't get Nana, but, you know, if you have Nana, you can pass her the return staff and return ring. She can use the return staff to send Leaf and Finn back here to the home castle, and then return ring herself. And once you kill these brigands, because otherwise the villages get abandoned, but once you kill the brigands, she can use the return staff to send them back and return herself, and then Leaf gets to participate in the majority of Chapter 7. Which is sort of it's not intended, but it is a way that you can just sort of let Leaf's training arc, you know, take place easier. We might need Master Knight Leaf by Chapter 8. I mean, it's not unfeasible. I do Chapter 8 Leaf most of the time. So it's not, like, difficult to get, but it does mean you're doing a good deal of grinding, and I think that's worth holding against him, especially since the grinding is kind of obnoxious. Like, it's not hard, it's just annoying. I trained him up to Master Knight by Chapter 8 in 0% growths, so you can do it. You just need to give him, like, good inheritance. Yeah. It is also worth noting that even if you don't pass everything you need to Nana, right now, the armory is selling the return staff. Unfortunately, it's not selling the return ring. We have it on Lester, and we can sell it with Lester, but it's really expensive. I don't think, yeah, it's 20k. So Jean would need 4 villages to get it. I don't think that's feasible. Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna get to do the cheese. Which, you know, whatever. We'll grind against the armors or whatnot. But it is a little bit obnoxious. Yeah, that's kind of all there is to say about him, though. It's more annoying to train him or Patty. I mean him because there's no reason to train Patty. Patty does everything she needs to at base. Let's talk about Jean, though. So Jean is the substitute for, or Jean, John, I don't know how you'd pronounce it. But she is the substitute for Nana. She's definitely worse than Nana, but I would say really the only reason she's worse than Nana is specifically because she can't inherit anything. I think Nana really benefits from the fact she can get inheritance. I mentioned the return trick, which is a nice cheese, but it's also just nice to automatically have return on her. Give her a couple other staffs so she doesn't have to spend money on them. Whereas John is just gonna have the Iron Sword and the Men's Staff. She's still one of only 2 horse healers and the only one you get without a grind session. So she's gonna be useful in that aspect in the same way that Ethlyn was really useful early on. No skills. I mean, who cares though? Like, yeah, obviously charisma is good on Nana, and that's one of Nana's benefits, but I don't think like Jeanne not having, like, obviously Tristan not having pursuit is sort of a death knell for him, right? Because he's supposed to be doing combat. But Jeanne is doing her job just by staffing people. It's also worth noting that, like, so her growth rates are pretty awful, and her bases are not that good either. But when comparing her growth rates to Nana's growth rates, it's actually not that unflattering. I actually pulled up. So Jeanne has basically 20% in everything. She has a 60% HP growth, 20% strength, 20% magic, 50% skill, 20% speed, 10% luck, 30% defense, 20% res. As compared to specifically Beowolf Nana is the one most people recommend. Beowolf Nana only has a 5% magic growth. She has a 70% strength growth because secretly she's a combat unit, whereas Jeanne is just a staffer. But I think that the most useful thing about either of them is just being able to be a mounted staffer. You know, you put mend on them, you run around, you heal people, you canto. And I think that is enough. She doesn't need to be a combat god because she's going to spend most of her player phase staffing anyway. We're going to have to be a little bit more careful with her in positioning than we would with Nana, since Nana can just, like, kill some stuff. But Jeanne can theoretically be a magic sword user, like 20% magic as opposed to 5% magic. It's still not good, but it's like, it's something. Now you could, if you wanted like a magic sword using paladin, You could pair Lachesis up with either like Claude or Azelle. Azelle gives 40%, Claude gives 25%. So it's not like Nana can't do that as well, but like Jan is better at it than Beowolf Nana, who is probably the best pairing for Lachesis. Except for, you know, obviously no pursuit, so better in quotation marks. I guess worth noting, Leaf doesn't need the pursuit ring after he promotes because Master Knight has pursuit as a class skill. So, you know, you can give it to someone else, like maybe Jan. Yeah, she's definitely like, it's weird to talk about her because I feel like the instinct is she's such a significant downgrade from Nana that she feels bad because Nana's like good, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think that, yeah, you don't have charisma. Yeah, you can't do combat, but the majority of what you're doing with Nana is utility stuff anyway. I'll miss the charisma, but yeah, it's whatever. She still staffs just as good as Nana. I'm not upset with Jan. Like, I think she's going to be weirdly one of our better units. Probably better than some of the non-substitutes in the army, just on account of being a horse staffer. And that's cool. Now we have Shannan's group. So, Shannan starts out with really, really good stats. 18 strength, 22 skill, 23 speed, 13 defense, and 38 HP is actually, like, only medium bulk for Fire Emblem 4, but it's good enough right now. Bad res, which is, like, unfortunate considering who he's fighting right now. But that's alright, you know? He'll be fine. Shannan is sort of like the ultimate example of what if we gave really good stats and also a really good PRF? I'm just going to initiate this talk. I'll rewind on it once we're done unit reviewing. I just want to show you the stats of the Balmong that he gets. So it's a 30 might weapon, like all holy weapons. 90 hit, and then it gives extra speed and extra skill. So it turns him into the traditional Swordmaster dodge tank. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any way to crit, but he can Astra. So like that kind of is his crit, and he has Adept, and he has Pursuit. So like that's kind of like the Swordmaster crit bonus when you think about it. Because either a Swordmaster crit or a Swordmaster Astra Adept kills something just as dead, especially with a 30 might sword, right? The biggest thing that holds Shannan back is he's an infantry unit. In a similar vein to like Larce and Ulster, or in our case, Radney and Rotoban, yeah, there's things for infantry to do, and on those infantry jobs, Shannan's probably your best unit, but it's still like, it's side work, right? It's busy work. Keeping Hannibal's army busy while, you know, Seliph rushes ahead to try to rescue Charlo, fighting the Muhammad squad in Chapter 8, fighting Wyverns in Chapter 9, fighting Dark Mages in Chapter 10. Like, there's jobs for infantry in Gen 2, but they're not the glorious stuff. They're not the most important things. So Shannan's gonna be, like, a great filler unit, because they just gave him really good stats. Not particularly good growths, but who cares? Like, his bases carry him. His bases and his bases and his legendary weapon. Like, the bases alone eventually won't be enough, but then you just use Balmong and he still kills stuff in the final map. But the most important stat is move, and he only has 6 of it, which is unfortunate for him. Because he really is just a combat unit. I think that unlike Ira in Generation 1, Shannan does actually live up to the promise. People say, like, oh, you know, Ira and Jamke have overkill combat, but they're footlocked. I don't think Ira and Jamke have overkill combat. I think their combat's just, like, okay-ish. I think Shannan legitimately has very, very fucking good combat, but he's footlocked. And so there's a ceiling on how well he can do, right? Especially in a no-rescue run like this. Like, at least if we inherited the rescue staff early, then Leaf could drag Shannan around and get him to the battlefield. But without rescue, it's very limited what he's going to be able to do. Patty, on the other hand, so this is the thief of Generation 2. We went with Dew Patty, so she functions very similarly to her father. I like passing down at least one magical sword, usually the Levin sword because it's the worst magic sword, and Patty doesn't care about her combat at all. She just wants to be able to attack from 2 range because anyone she hits, she is able to steal money from. Now, in Gen 2, if you're doing a non-substitute run, money is a lot less tight than Gen 1, and as such, I think Dew is typically the better thief. But if you're running, like, all substitutes or even some number of substitutes, suddenly you get a lot more units that are just not very money sufficient, and the more subs you're using, the more Patty and or Daisy stonks go up, right? So in our case, we have 6 substitutes, and most of them are pretty shit, and even the good one, Jean, is going to need a lot of money because she wants to buy staffs, right? So I think Patty is going to be a lot more important for us than she typically would be. She's still good in a typical run, and it's like her stats don't matter. The only thing that matters is this, that she can steal gold and she can give it to other people. But it's just that Gen 2 units tend to be much more money self-sufficient because they can go through the arena more easily. Yeah, I like Patty. I like Dew Patty because you can use bargain in the same way Dew can to just sort of buy junk to control how much gold you're giving people. And that's nice. But not much else to say about her. She starts with a sleep edge, which is like people use the sleep edge for there's a cheesy harvest kill you can do with it. And because Patty starts with it, people like to use it on Patty just because, like, she's a shitty sword unit who can do it. We might go for that. No promises, but we might go for that. We might also do it with, like, Tristan or someone stupid, because we have a lot of shitty sword units now. But yeah, nothing else to say. I passed her, like, some valuables to sell as well. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. Stats matter for survivability. I guess that's true. Like, her bulk matters, but her bulk is bad. Like, she has 30 physical bulk, 28 magical bulk. So, like, for example, if she were to attack this guy, he does not kill her. But I believe the mages kill her? Yes, the mages kill her. But in terms of one-range enemies, you can attack them with the Levin sword, which is why I like passing it down to her. You could pass the Wind Edge. I know a lot of people like to pass the Wind Edge because Dew gets it for free, as opposed to Levin sword, which you have to purchase. But I think that the Wind Edge is a better weapon than the Levin sword, and so I want to give it to my combat units, which is why I have it on, what's her name? Fee. But yeah. Her stats do matter, I guess, in terms of, like, her accuracy is affected by skill, which, God, that's unfortunate. And her survivability matters. All of her stats that actually matter, though, are bad, which is very unfortunate. Very unfortunate for her. Alright, let's do an Ares unit review. Now that I actually remember he exists. So, this is Ares. Ignore the fact he's damaged. He hasn't leveled up, so we can at least show his base stats, right? Decent Cavalier stats. He's the only Cavalier in Gen 2. I guess Oifey technically is a Paladin. But he's the only, like, base Cavalier and one of only 2 Paladins. So he's gonna be one of only 3 units who can use both swords and lances. Oh, 4, I guess, actually, technically. One Seliph promotes. As I mentioned in Gen 1 with the Gen 1 Paladins, even though swords are the best weapon type by a significant margin, having lance access so you can use the crit jav, which I built up like 1.5 crit javs, right? Like the big one is this one right here. We built up 71 kills on this for Ares. It's gonna be his weapon of choice. Crit Jav is very good. Being able to, like, just have that extra tool. I guess you could also use the Horse Slayer, but there's not really that many good opportunities for it, because after this, most horses are going to be, like, 1-2 range wind mages and shit. But But Ares himself has decent stats, good growths, and not just decent stats. I'd say these are good stats, and then very good growths. Actually, let me just pull up his exact numbers, because I do think that, like, I think that it's important to emphasize just how good FE4 Ares. If I'm gonna make the case that he's a top 3 Gen 2 unit, I should emphasize just how good. 130% HP growth and 90% strength growth. All the other growths are actually pretty mediocre. Only 30% speed, only 40% defense, only 30% res. But that strength growth and that HP growth mean that he will take a lot of punishment, and he will deal a lot of punishment out. He's going to get HP every level and strength almost every level. That's before factoring in the promotion bonuses for Paladin. He gets another 3 speed on promoting from Paladin, so he'll go up to 13 speed, plus whatever he can get from his pretty abysmal growths. Jimothy Cricket's Batman, he has good strength and HP. Yeah, and he starts with 4 magic, which is better than people cope the magical swords on Alec, right? Ares can actually use them if you want, because you get 5 magic on promo, right? So he'll have 9 magic as a paladin. Even though he only has a 5% magic growth, 9 is decent. I think it's better to use a crit jav, which is why I trained up a crit jav. But if you didn't do that, having a magic sword is like all right. Especially if you didn't go with magical fee. Like if you did a physical fee, then there's not that many good users of magic swords. It's like Leaf, who's not really a combat unit, and I mean, I guess, you know, we have Arthur, but like Arthur can use tomes, right? So what's the point? So he's not terrible. His skills are also awesome. So he has he has Pursuit, Adept, and oh no, he does have Vantage, yeah. So Pursuit, Adept, and Vantage. Pursuit, obviously necessary for doubling, very, very good. Adept just means sometimes he'll randomly kill things he wouldn't otherwise. Stacks with the fact you can give him a crit weapon, which is part of why I really like crit jav on him. And then Vantage sort of supplements his bulk, because while his defense growth is, 40% is actually all right for FE4. It's just not great. But his HP is very good, and his defense is all right. He didn't get those skills from his father. Yeah, the unnamed village woman fucking goats him out. Granier, thank you, default format. Fucking, I need the smart FE4 lore lit people in my chat, because there's like all this obscure lore that I just don't know about. Hello anime chess players. Today I learned Ares Advantage. It's easy to forget, but like against a group of 1-range enemies, you can just have him equip his 30 might sword, and he's fucking invincible, because he'll just Vantage kill them all. Oh, I should probably have him equip his 30 might sword so I can show you. So it gives him the critical skill and an extra 20 skill. At base, my man has a 1 in 3 chance to land a critical hit with his 30 might weapon. It also gives 10 res, only 10 res. Yeah, 10 res is like unfortunate because on its own, it's not enough to push him to, you want around 20 res in endgame, and he's not gonna get there on its own. You give him a barrier ring, he gets there. So I think Ares is one of the best users of the barrier ring. Pushes him to 20. That way he, what is actually the threshold on endgame for those status mages? I want to pull that up. I feel like 20 is a good number for facing the mages, but FE4 endgame. I want to see the exact number we need for dodging sleep. Do you have that shit listed on here? WOD. It doesn't. Okay, let's look at the good wiki, the .org wiki. Do you have all the enemies listed, enemy data, or is that just fates that they have good data for? Arena enemies. Yep, we have the enemy. Okay. High Priest has a magic stat of 21. Okay, so with a barrier ring and Mistletoe, he has 19. He needs to get res twice, and his res growth is 30%. I think he dodges sleep. Fucking easy pants, right? And he absolutely dodges sleep if you give him Mistletoe. So that 10 res is actually super relevant against the status spam because it's what pushes him over the edge. You need 22, in order to dodge a 21 magic, you need 22, I believe. No, you need 21 to dodge a 21 magic. Yeah, so, I forgot how good his res growth is. It's good, it's just, you know, it's still FE4, right? Like, everyone's res growth is bad. But 30% is good for FE4, right? But yeah, with Mistletoe, he can just Vantage Sweep people. With Mistletoe, he can dodge endgame status. The fact he can equip Lances means that he can also Vantage at 1-2 range with a crit Jav. And he has very good skill. I mean, with Mistletoe, he doesn't even need to get a crit to kill things often, just because of how good his strength growth is. But once, like, once he gets going, he snowballs super hard. I don't think it's safe for him to fight this squad on its own, just because, like, we've got some bow units, so he can't Vantage them. And then Silver Sword Jabaro with Adept is a little bit scary. But he is very, very easy to train. And the fact that he just starts out with the Holy Weapon, like, you have to set up Arthur in order to make him a mounted Holy Weapon user. You need to set up Seliph, and then he doesn't get a Holy Weapon until the end of Chapter 10. Eris just starts out mounted and starts out a Holy Weapon user, and just dominates from fucking moment one. Even in the no swords playthrough I did, where he couldn't use the Mistletoe, he was dominant just because of his stats are that good. Once you throw in the fact that he has Mistletoe, yes, repairing holy weapons is expensive, and without inheritance, he has surprisingly little gold. But there's a lot of villages here. You can do that. He's basically free to marry the dancer. Either Sylvia or Leela. In our case, it's Leela. But yeah, just Arena. I mean, obviously just Arena as well. But Eris has a almost free marriage with the dancer. And while, you know, you might want to purchase like Night Ring, right? Leg Ring on her. I think for the most part, the dancer's money is pretty easy to hand to Eris. And so, especially if it's Sylvia's kid, Lean, then Eris is going to, because Sylvia can pass down inheritance to her kid, right? And so then Eris gets that extra source of money, similar to Deirdre. Of course, he doesn't get it by default, but he has the highest love space with her and the highest love growth. Like, it's gonna happen unless you explicitly try not to. This is a really fucking good unit. Like, really, really fucking good unit. Let's unit review Layla. This is gonna be probably a pretty quick one because dancer good, four-way dancer better. Layla is the substitute for Lean. So she asks the question, would you rather have inheritance, like monetary inheritance, or the skill charm? Personally, I prefer the skill charm because I'm not a huge fan of Leg Ring and Night Ring on the dancer. I think Night Ring is good on the dancer, but I think Leg Ring is better on like Seliph. But if you want inheritance, you know, you pass rings down to her. One skill bad unit. If you want inheritance, you pass rings down to her. Lean is also better at going through the arena because she has like Miracle and can do abuse strats like that. Whereas Layla is pretty bad in the arena. But hey, dancing for people is good. I like that she can bolster people's hit and avoid as well. Like, that's why I like Charm. Multiple uses of Charm stack with each other, so if you have Lachesis' kids, they can all stack. Either way, I don't think it's a huge deal. I think the bigger appeal of this substitute pairing is the second unit, the Corporal Charlo split, which I will, you know, we'll talk about when we get to them. But yeah, her secret event gets you the barrier sword, which is pretty cool. It's like the shield sword bolstering defense, but it bolsters res instead. The thing is that it only gives 7 res, which is not enough to push you over the status threshold. Like Mistletoe is barely getting there with 10, and Tearfin gets there because of 20. I don't think the barrier sword makes a difference, except for maybe equipping it on Leaf? What's Leaf's res growth anyway? Like, Maybe Leaf? I feel like it's not good. FE4 Leaf. 10%, yeah, no, fucking washed. The barrier sword is just not very good. Like, that's her secret event item. So, like, I don't care about it. She gets an exclusive sword. Yeah, that's the barrier sword. That's in this chapter. One of the villages. This village, if Layla visits this village, right here, you hit the barrier sword, which gives +7 res when equipped. That's what I'm talking about. It's bad. Like, res is a very good stat here, but 7 doesn't push you far enough. And the two best sword units are Erez and Seliph, who already get a better version of the barrier sword. So, like, what are you even fucking doing with it, right? 50% strength growth. Yeah, but who cares? She shouldn't be seeing combat. Like, she shouldn't. Also, that's good, but again, who cares? Like, 50% is not good. It's decent, though, right? But also, who cares? Like, her combat doesn't matter. She's born to do one thing, and it's this. I forgot if the barrier sword stacks with the barrier ring. I believe it does, but that's still only a total of 12, and you need 21 res in order to avoid getting statused into endgame, which I don't think is enough. Like, the extra 12, you would need a 9 res unit, and that's just not gonna happen outside of Seliph and Erez, I think, for the most part. Like, even Arthur, who can use swords, Arthur doesn't have a good res growth, right? Like, in theory, it vaguely makes you somewhat better at, fighting mages? But, like, you're not countering mages if you have the barrier sword equipped, right? So it's a catch-22. Shannan or Serinde? Nah, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think anyone really wants the barrier sword. Barrier sword's lame. Barrier sword's lame, I'll say it. But Layla's cool. I like Layla. I like Charm. Fee could probably hit it. She has worse res growth than you would think. FE4 Claude Fee. 35%. So that's, like, good for FE4, but you're not gonna hit the benchmark, usually. Good job, Patty. No, Patty! You were supposed to steal the gold! Let's talk about another bad unit, a different bad unit. So this is Tinny. She is, like, bad. So she's under-leveled, obviously. Level 3 infantry mage. So she's running into the, she's running into the same sort of issue that, or she's running into two issues at the same time. One is super under-leveled, so it's gonna be hard to, like, find areas where she can contribute. The other is the infantry issue that so many people have run into, where it's just like, just reaching combat is a chore. But once she gets to combat, her combat's also pretty bad. 23 attack, because Elf Thunder, plus 9 magic. We gave her Lewyn, which hurts her magic a lot, which is really unfortunate, because while Arthur can use Wrath, Tinny kind of relies on Wrath, right? Like, she's so underpowered that she does want to use those critical hits to double her power. And just Wrath is not very good when you have a low magic stat, right? It's just not gonna double as much. She can adept in critical. I guess she could, like, gamble to get stuff. But unlike Arthur, she doesn't get a horse on promotion. She does at the very least get stabs, because she becomes a female war mage. Female war mages have staff access, so, like, that's nice, being another staffer, but it's not worth training this pile of garbage for 17 levels just to get an infantry staffer when we already have Lana for free, Julia for free, Gian as a mounted staffer for free, and then you can train up Leaf to be another mounted staffer, and we'll get Sed for free soon as well. It's just not that appealing to me. At least with Wrath, Tinny is very good at going through the arena. But like again, with the low magic, like not even all that much this Tinny. She can use Tornado, only when she's promoted. Only when she's promoted. And like, that's not happening, let's be honest. I know a lot of people love this unit. People love like the under-leveled Skrunklies, right? You know, the Donald moment. Fee's gonna be mounted staffer too. Yeah, all right, Fee as well, so there's just so many other options. I never really cared for her. I think that she, like, I get why people like her. I kind of wish that she started, like, closer to promotion so that she could become a staffer. Because story-wise, she doesn't want to be a combat unit. She gets wrecked by the Jormungandr guys. Oh yeah, because they got res too. Well, she can Wrath to go through the res, but even still, it's pretty bad. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. She doesn't want to be a combat unit. She can get boosts from Leaf and Said. So yeah, she can boost people's magic by marrying them. So she can sort of help that way. I don't really give credit for that, though. There's not really anything she as a unit is doing. It's, like, prioritize that pairing. For Said, though, like, Said's often going to cap magic without that. So it's not even that big a deal. I don't know. She can eat the villagers in the next chapter, but even then, like, so my problems with her are twofold. It's because the payoff for training her is also nothing. At least with someone like Leaf or Fee or someone, like, where you get a concrete payoff for training them. Tinny is a infantry staffer. We don't need another infantry staffer. Like, that payoff is not worth the price of the villagers. I'd rather give the villagers to Leaf if he's not promoted yet. I'd rather give the villagers to Gian. I'd rather give the villagers... Heck, Javier at least can say, like, I get bows out of it or some shit, right? There's just nothing worth training her for. It's not just that it's hard to get her kills. Did chat freeze? No, it's still moving on my end. It's not just that it's hard to get her kills, it's that, like, what is the payoff for doing this? Nothing. It's really nothing. It would have been better balanced if Arthur and Tinny's join time swapped. I guess. I don't really care, though. A lot of people, like, care about balance in the cast, but, like, what's the point of that, right? This single-player game. There's always going to be a best unit, right? I honestly find it boring in modern games when everyone can be viable. I think that the casts are much more exciting and dynamic when people fill different roles. And inevitably, people filling different roles is gonna lead to top dogs and bottom dogs, right? It's unfortunate that Tinny is just, like, both bad and, in my opinion, unfun. Like, bad in an unfun way. But that's kind of the lot of an FE4 infantry unit anyway. Balance is out the window in FE4, I'm fine with it. Yeah, I don't really care about balance, TBH. People throw out, like, unbalanced like it's bad design. Which, like, for a multiplayer game, absolutely, if you're trying to get, like, a balanced multiplayer. But FE4 is not a PvP experience. And unfortunately, that means that Tinny sucks. But honestly, I think it would be better if she just started as a staffer, right? Like a Julia type deal, where she could use thunder magic and staves. If I had a request for the remake, like if I could write to the editor and get a request for the remake, she would be a staffer. Because she doesn't want to do combat anyway. Like, what if she uses only offensive magic, but then when Arthur recruits her, and he's like, you don't have to fight anymore, then she gets staff access. That'd be cool. Maybe A-rank staves at base. Oh, right, let's Fibal unit review. I completely forgot. So Fibal is a unit who, for some reason, I always gaslight myself into thinking he's a sniper, but he starts out as an archer. He's unpromoted. And he's a level 9 archer, already facing, like, infantry problems and bowlock problems. But at least he has Ufel. Unfortunately, unlike Brigid, Ufel is the earliest holy weapon, which, like, sort of helps Brigid. But in Fibal's case, you already have Mistletoe. You might already have Forsetti. And if you don't already have Forsetti, you're probably getting Forsetti very soon after Fibal, because Sed is very soon after Fibal. You already have Balmong, so, like, you're competing with the other legendary weapons now, right? And Mistletoe is always on a horse, too, so, like, you can't even be like, oh, well, you know, he's not a horse, but, you know, he's on a legendary weapon. It's just sort of like, Ufel's not a very good legendary weapon. Like, 70 hit, 2 range locked, and it bolsters 10 strength, 10 speed. At least Fibal always has Pursuit. We gave him Doodad, so he's also gonna have Bargain, which I really like because it helps him basically just constantly repair Ufel, because it's the only good bow he's gonna use, since Lester's going to have the Killer Bow and Brave Bow, which are the other two, like, good bows. There's wyverns to shoot down this map and next map, so it's not the end of the world being bow locked, but I'd much rather have access to one range and be able to take on the Kaga blocks safely. And of course, you know, infantry problems. I've been repeating over and over infantry problems. At least in Fibal's case, the biggest bow area is in chapter 9, which is the next chapter. There are several instances where a bunch of wyverns, like, spread out and attack everyone. And in those instances, it's nice to just take advantage of everyone who can use bows. Whether that be Hannibal the General, who has even worse movement than Fibal, or your infantry archer Fibal, or your cavalry archers in Leaf and Lester. And so having, like, how can we forget Javier? How can we forget Javier? So, like, it's nice to have all those bow users for the wyvern that you have to fight, and that's cool for him. And then they will come to you, so it's not really, like, huge infantry problems in that one scenario. He still faces infantry problems for the rest of the game, and as a late joiner, you know, the bar is high. Remember, Sed is the next unit who's going to join our army. So, like, Fibal just looks really bad in comparison. At least he has high enough speed that he'll double in one round the wyverns, which is cool. What I'm getting is that Ufel is smelly. I mean, 30 might effective weapon is still cool, but, oh, right, and then because he uses bows, he gets the better arena, as we can demonstrate. Well, or we could just fucking do that. We don't even need the better arena. We just one-shot with Ufel. So yeah, you know, I don't like him. I think he's one of the worst units in Gen 2. But he's not without purpose. His obvious job is to kill wyverns, and he's pretty good at it. And I just think that's neat. So this is Sed the Brave. We did Claude Sed, which is the second highest magic growth. But honestly, in many ways, his growths are not a huge deal. Sorry, sneeze. I'll redo this from start, because this is gonna be part of the unit review compilation. I don't want the sneeze in there. Okay, so this is Sed the Brave. As with all of the other infantry units, right? He's gonna run into infantry problems, like, oh no, low movement. Yes, there's jobs for infantry to do, but it's hard for him to be a combat carry, right? I feel like I don't need to repeat that for every single infantry unit. In Sed's case, these stats are, like, actually really fucking good. Sed is one of the few, you know, whenever there's discussions about like the infantry units, the defenders will always come out and be like, sure, they don't have movement, but if you actually use them, if you actually bother to train Jamke and Ira and Ulster and Rodelbahn, they actually have really good combat. Did you know they actually have really good combat? And like, that's a lie. For the most part, they have like on par or worse than combat than your horse units. Sed is the exception that proves the rule, because Sed's combat is actually fucking phenomenal. 22 base magic, 23 base speed. This isn't the default because of how inheritance works, but he's gonna end up with around that, right? This guy one rounds with the lightning tome, which is a very powerful weapon, basically the only weapon he needs. So inheritance purposes, I think it's generally best to pass him mostly staves. We did Claude Sed, so he got the Fortify staff already. Or not the Fortify, the Valkyrie staff and Fortify, just because Claude gave most of his money to Aaron. But I think if you want, especially if you're not going as all in on Lana as we are, passing Sed some staves is cool. One of the very funny things you can do is you can pass him the sleep staff, and green units have infinite durability on their stabs. So he will just, if you leave him unrecruited, he will just put a bajillion wyverns to sleep as a green unit. And that's like a good way to train up your scrubs. I've seen someone do that in a ranked run because as a staff unit, Sed's EXP is basically free because he can just staff every turn. So you can leave him unrecruited for a while and like have him put the wyverns to sleep and it's fine. Lightning is light magic in all games. Yeah, so this is light magic. It has triangle advantage over fire, thunder, and wind, and is neutral to dark. As opposed to the elemental magics are all triangle disadvantage to dark, and light. And then they have their own triangle in and of themselves. So light is just better than the other ones, especially because it's 5 weight, right? Like, yeah, it's not as light as wind, but when you've got as much speed as Sed does, he's going to be doubling and one-rounding stuff anyway, because, oh yeah, he has Pursuit. It's his only default skill, but obviously, you know, depending on what father you give him, he can have other skills. And then Adept is a class skill of Sages, so just in case you're not one-rounding, which, to be fair, FE4 enemies are pretty bulky, Adept can sometimes just push you over the distance. He's not the bulkiest boy out there, with only 8 defense. I mean, magically, he's super bulky. His res means, by default, ours isn't getting status in endgame, which is fucking epic. That means he can be our restore user, because one of the problems with restore is if your restore user gets silenced, like, go fuck yourself, you can't trade it. So that's why I like giving it to Sed or Lana if she has a good mom. Because if you have over 21 res, then you'll never get silenced, you'll never get slept, and you can just be the good restore user, and him having it by default is just fucking, like, chef's kiss. Now, obviously, with all of that being said, oh yeah, right, he's not super bulky physically because of his defense, but his high speed means that oftentimes he can kind of dodge tank, especially if you stack it with the multiple charms. We only have access to one charm, but, like, I've had him just hit 0 against sword enemies before. In 0 growth. Oh, no, that was Hawk. But Sed's, like, basically the same unit, just better. Because he gets inheritance and shit. So, yeah, a fucking phenomenal unit. With all of that being said, there is still a ceiling for infantry. Gen 2 is much more foot-friendly than Gen 1, but you're either going to be slowing yourself down and potentially missing side objectives, or consigning Sed to many of the, like, side objectives, right? He joins relatively late as well. At least next map is a very good one for footies. And he's honestly probably better at fighting the wyverns than, what's his name? The archer we just got? The fucking sniper guy, Fibal. I think Sed's probably better at fighting the wyverns than Fibal, because he hits them on res, so even though he's not dealing effective damage, wyverns just don't have resistance stats, right? And he can actually counter them on enemy phase, so Sed can just take on a Kaga block and delete them, whereas Fibal's just, like, killing one person per turn, right? maybe a couple more if you set him up in Jav range. So he's kind of just set up for success. I think the most notable thing Sed can do is he can cap his magic pretty easily, and because sages have access to B rank staves, ours has star rank, but most sages have B rank. He can silence enemy magic users, and there's a couple of very dangerous bosses that it's really nice to be able to silence. The big one is endgame Ishtar, but chapter 10 Ishtar, can you silence chapter 10 Julius? I actually don't remember. And then, you know, enemy status staff users on the cliffs if you don't have enough flyers to kill them all at once. How does he compare to Azelle Sed? Both of them usually cap their magic, especially since Sed can get a event if he marries Tinny over here, or Linda if you're doing substitutes. So I don't think it's like a huge deal. Ultimately, like, still gonna be held back by the fact that he's just a foot unit, but damn, if you're gonna be a foot unit, be Sed, right? Like, be Sed, kind of like how Shannan was a couple of chapters ago, except for in Shannan's joint chapter, it wasn't actually all that friendly to infantry. Sed's next chapter is actually pretty friendly to infantry, which is cool for him, because he does have those overkill stats and shit. I like Azelle Sed better. Azelle Sed, so Azelle Sed has the upside of better magic and, well, not better skills, because Sed already has Pursuit. It's literally just better magic, and I guess better fire rank, but you're not fucking using fire on this guy. But the downside is you have to train up Azelle, and he can't inherit staves, and I think inheriting staves is a really big deal. Like, yeah, I'd rather give most of my staves to Lana and Nana, but Sed getting some is just, you know, it's gravy for him. Hannibal. So, fun fact, if you killed General Hannibal, Charlot doesn't join you. If you kill Hannibal, then Charlot just goes, "You murderers, you killed my daddy!" And then he doesn't join you. This is Charlot. He is the substitute unit for Corporal. And they both fill the same role of, like, being, what if we gave you a level 1 unit in chapter 9? And that's already bad, like, you know, est moment, right? But Charlot at the very least has Paragon, so he does actually get extra experience. But being only able to staff does still slow your experience gain. He gets double from staffs, and he starts with Physic, which is a good staff. But yeah, it's just sort of very unfortunate. Like, at this point, Lana and or Mana have started to fall off, right? Because they're stuck as foot staffers. Charlot shows up and he's like, I'm the foot staffer who, like, is so far away from being able to promote her anyway. Azelle Corpore is probably a better healer because he has 60% magic growth. Well, here's the thing, that doesn't matter. Your magic stat really doesn't matter in terms of healing in Fire Emblem 4 because the staff formula is super generous and your magic doesn't affect physic range. Like, physic is always 10 range. Mend will almost always cap everything off. I guess for, like, physic and heal, it kind of matters, but even then, I don't think it's such a huge deal. And Corporate doesn't have Paragon, so, like, good luck using that growth, right? Mend is 20 plus 2 times magic. Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. It is kind of ridiculous, the healing formulas in this game. What a nice physics staff. I would trade it for a bench for Charlot. I mean, I do think, you know, in FE4, everyone is free deploy, so I do think you do use him. You don't just, like, leave him in the home castle. Because, like, as an infantry unit, you know, having physic is nice. Being able to heal people from far away is nice. Because you're not going to keep up with everyone. But ultimately, he is probably the least impactful Gen 2 unit. I think he's probably the worst Gen 2 unit. It's like either him or his dad, right? They're fighting over the spot. Altena isn't in contention really, but she is also bad. We'll talk about her in a second. But like, Yeah, like, what does he even do? He just heals people. At a point where a lot of your army doesn't consistently need healing, right? At this point, you've trained up your super units. They're not gonna need a ton of healing, and if you want healing, you have Nana or Jian, and you have Leaf, who are mounted healers. You have Fee, who's probably a mounted healer by now. It's just... there's not that much for him to do. Even in the case of, like, other infantry units, we can at least find jobs for them. But the infantry jobs are basically over. Like, this is kind of the last map where there's good jobs for infantry. And even in that case, like, you saw Lana didn't really do much. She was healing people sometimes, but yeah. It's just a really unfortunate situation. Corporal is the biggest demonstration of why staff units do not work for the Est, like, role. At least Charlotte does actually level up fast, but... and then what? Because that's the other thing. Someone mentioned in chat a little earlier that in FE4, the priest promotion, High Priest, does not gain movement. They're still a 5-move class. As opposed to Sage, which we can see with Sed, has 6 move. Oh, he's in the castle, right? So, like, they're basically armored movement, right? Tellius Mage's moment. It's really sad that even when he promotes, basically all he gets is just C rank for every weapon type so he can arena, which I guess is helpful for getting money to, like, repair stabs. But really, the only staff he should be using anyway is Physic. Or Valkyrie. Well, not Charlo, but, like, Corporal could use Valkyrie if you gave him that, I guess. Anyway, with that sort of pet peeve rant out of the way, let's talk about Altena, because... so, Altena is a Wyvern, which is normally, like, the best class, or among the best classes in most Fire Emblem games. In FE4, being a flyer does hold you back because you can't use roads, which is unfortunate. But Altena does still join with very good stats. She's also unpromoted, so she's 3 levels away from getting promotion bonuses, which is cool. And she can use swords, which is the best weapon type. Adept and critical, cool, whatever. No pursuit, very sad. But she has Gabelk to hit super hard. Like 30 might weapon that gives you plus 10 strength, so functionally a 40 might weapon. So sometimes she doesn't need to double. I do think if you want to use her combat-wise, you probably want to give her the Pursuit Ring, but there's other people who want the Pursuit Ring more. Gabelk itself is a very interesting weapon. She gets Pursuit on promo. That's true, she does get Pursuit on promo. You're right. So I guess you probably don't even give her the ring, because I was gonna say, like, oh, just 3 levels. No, she's 3 levels away from Pursuit. Yeah, so you're right. In those 3 levels, she can find stuff to one-shot with Gabelk. It'll be fine. Gabelk itself gives her 10 strength, 10 skill, which does help with critical, by the way, and 10 defense. So these stats are very impressive, even for a unit who joins at this stage in the game, when you compare her to her competition. She's got better stats than Hannibal. Honestly, even without the Gabelk, you could say she's pretty close, right? Like 2 defense short, whatever. So that's pretty cool. The unfortunate thing is, obviously, you know, availability is bad. She's one of the last units to join you. Can be the last unit to join you if Hannibal goes better. But also, yeah, as chat is pointing out, that 2 res is fucking devastating. For some reason, the Fire Emblem community has decided that res is a dump stat, which is like the most fucking bizarro thing to me. But in FE4, res is an incredibly important stat, not only because there are a lot of status stabs that you just don't want to get put to sleep, or, I guess there's no Berserk, but like put to sleep would be the relevant one for her, but also because the last few maps, which are the maps that Altena is around for, are predominantly magic users. So, at the point that we get her, the next castle we're about to face is a ballista castle down here. So Altena's not particularly good at fighting them because, you know, she's a flyer, they shoot her down. And there's a squad of mounted reinforcements up here that include Tornado Mage Knights. So Altena gets fucking cooked by them because 2 resistance. She is actually quite good against the Wyvern reinforcements, the 3-headed Wyvern, where there's 3 squads of Wyverns that'll split up to attack. And Altena is actually quite good against them, and they can be some of the more challenging enemies on this map. So I think that's, like, a genuine upside for her. Not only is she good at fighting them, but she can fight them in the mountains, which is, like, a rare quality and a good quality, because oftentimes you want to take them out before they can reach you, right? So that's really good. After this map, though, Chapter 10 is almost all mages and status sap spam. And the one area where there would be huge flyer utility in saving Tyrfing is exclusively fighting dark mages with that fucking 2 resistance stat. You can give her the barrier sword once she well, I was gonna say once she promotes, but like even without it, you can give her the barrier sword that boosts by 7 res. So that's good. Like, she's a good user of the barrier sword, but that's still not enough. Like, she gets 2-tapped by those guys. And then in endgame, almost all enemies are, we got magical squad, then we got the bow squad, then we got another magical squad, and then we got another magical squad. It's so bad. It's so bad for her. She just matches up. The only, okay, there is one squad on endgame that I forgot about. There's a squad of axe knights, and she does good against them because, you know, they're physical and she has 30 defense. But they're also axe enemies. Give anyone a sword, and they will do good against the axe enemies. I promise you. Fucking Rodobon will do good against the axe enemies. I promise you it's not that impressive to be able to kill the endgame axe squad. The only physical squad in endgame is axe units. Yeah, I mean, but she can use swords, right? So, like, she is genuinely good against them. It's just like, you know, so is fucking everyone. They are the most unthreatening enemies in the goddamn world. So, Altena is just, she's in this position where it's kind of like Garrick from FE10, where you have this really, really impressive stat spread, but unfortunately, the enemies that you match up against are just not conducive to that stat spread. She can bonk something really hard, though, with Gaybold. Like, that is genuinely a thing she can do, and that's pretty cool. Right now, she has 62 damage. Just fucking flat 62 damage. That's enough to kill a lot of things. But so is this. Right? Like, I don't know. Definitely more useful than the other units that join on this map, but it's just sad. It's just sad is what it is. I think she's pretty easily, well, so if we don't count McAllis, who is like kind of a meme in FE12, I think Altena is easily the worst Wyvern in the franchise. Yes, even worse than Ada. Yes, even worse than... What other even bad Wyverns are there? I know a lot of people don't like Zeus, but like, come on, hard mode bonuses, right? Yeah, aside from FE12, Rosado, I mean, he's like filler. He's peak filler, right? Aside from FE12 McAllis, I don't think there's a Wyvern that is worse than her. Shersh, but she's not actually bad. I did a video on that. Sure, she's not actually bad. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than, you know, very unfortunate situation. It's time for our last unit review. So, Hannibal is a pre-promoted general. He starts with only swords, but he can use all weapon types, including the killer bow, which is like kind of useful for fighting these wyverns. His stat spread is cool, like 20 strength, 22 defense. He's certainly the general of all time. And, Adept Vantage Pavise, like, he's set up to be a tank. The big problem is right there below talk. 5 movement. He's just not gonna keep up to, like, actually do combat and stuff. That and everything I talked about with Altena, almost all of it applies to Hannibal. 6 resistance, ironically better than 2 resistance. Like, he's better at fighting the mages than Altena, I guess. But realistically, he's still getting fucking 2-tapped by them, right? And there's just so many mages in late game. He can, at the very least, fight the bow units. Ballista Castle's not going to be as much of a big deal for him. And the bow squad in endgame is not going to be as much of a big deal for him. So, like, he has slightly better matchups than Altena. Very, very, very occasionally. And the fact he can use bows means that he is actually, like, a decent counter to the bow squad, because he's just physically strong. You just throw the brave bow on him, let him go to town. But unfortunately, like, having lower move than her and not having that superpower Gaybulg means he's still not gonna be useful. Like, I think ultimately he is less useful than her. He can defend the castle, against the big wyvern 3-headed dragon assault that's about to happen. Captain of the Bow Knights doubles and destroys him, probably. But yeah, you know, he starts with Wing Clipper, so he can help you against the wyverns, I guess, but I think Altena's better against them too, just because, again, peaks, like flying on peaks is nice, and she has functionally better stats with the Gaybulg, because she should never be using any other weapon, against physical enemies, obviously. But yeah, it's just like, he's just kind of a why bother. He's not useless. He has niche situations where his tools kit is helpful. He suffers from common general L's, basically. And, like, those common general L's are exacerbated in FE4, where movement is so much more important than any other Fire Emblem. So it's unfortunate for him. But he and Charlo have a secret event that we're gonna get, where Charlo gets the Berserk Staff, so that's pretty cool.